Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting but quarantined edition of the Jim Cornette Experience, the show that has been exceeding lowered expectations since 2013. And folks, today we're going to have scintillating discussion on exciting, controversial topics like paint drying, grass growing, the different smells of popcorn farts, and how to make face masks out of dryer lint and duct tape. All for the good folks who are stuck in their houses or various orifices wherever they occupy those. This almost sounds like a fucking drive-through open. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to join me, Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you. He is the only man in the world that can strap a bucket of hand sanitizer on his back and ride a motor scooter across Manhattan, the great Brian Last.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again, and I will not be doing that. I will not be going anywhere near Manhattan for the foreseeable future.
How did it be? Go ahead.
I was going to say, which sucks, because that's the best kosher deli in the world.
No. Well, I'm sorry you can't get your pastrami.
That's right.
Or your fucking Reuben.
No, we'll go back to the pastrami on rye.
Pastrami on rye. Well, Henri. That's an old fucking routine. I was going to say Mel Brooks or Mel Tillis, one of those Mels, Mel Gibson. Anyway, how the fuck did it happen that suddenly the United States has 4 times more cases of coronavirus than any other country in the world? How did this what are we just a susceptible bunch, or do we just go and cough in each other's fucking mouths on the streets in some cities? I was not aware of this custom. How the fuck did this happen? I can understand not trusting Chinese reporting, right? Oh yeah, we got 14 cases or whatever, but the United Kingdom, suddenly our friends across the pond are engaged in a big cover up now. What the fuck are we doing as apparently dirty, filthy people that is causing sickness and illness and pestilence and famine and vermin and catastrophe, baby, to be transmitted at such a high rate of speed here in this country above all places in the world? Right, Doctor, I know you have a pre-med background.
No, pre-law, but same difference.
Well, pre-law and pre-med. You switched halfway, like Dutch Mantel.
First of all, those numbers, we've got to remember, the testing numbers sway everything, because you could say this many people have it in America. That many people have been tested and turned up positive in America. We don't know how many people have it in America. That's
but that's maybe even worse, because they've shown that they're testing more in almost every other country than they are us, as far as per capita of the population. So they're testing more people and coming up with less cases. We're testing fewer people and coming up with more. What the fuck?
Have you ever ridden I know the answer, I think, to this already. Have you ever ridden a subway?
Are you out of your mind?
When you want to know how things are spreading.
What the fuck? What? No, I've seen them on television and in the movies. But no, you think me, of all people, with every phobia that I have and mental picadillo that I possess, am going to go way underground in a tunnel that was built in 1930, if I'm being generous, probably, underneath the city of New York with the weight of those skyscrapers, in an enclosed tube with a variety of strangers and a police officer not in fucking ready sight, and fucking be smashed and bundled and pummeted around in this fucking tube from one place to another, and then be dropped off with no idea where the fuck I am or how to fucking get anywhere except to go up to daylight. You have got to be out of your ever-loving pea-picking mind, Brian Last.
When you were in England, did you take the tube?
We took a train that went through a few extended tunnels. I don't know what do they call the tube? Is it underground?
They call it the tube. Yes.
Well, we didn't go underground. Anytime I see a goddamn side of arrow pointing down in a city and you have to go down stairs from what you were on, which is ground, for transportation, no, fuck that. No, I don't go down. I don't go up and I don't go down. I stay level, baby.
That's what you're known for, being level.
I'm known for being level. I'm always level. But hey, the virus has done good. Anyway, what have we? So we didn't figure out, first of all, why. Before I say the virus has done one good thing, but we didn't figure out why we're just a bunch of just dirty, filthy, disease-infested fucks here in this country, and how this is just spreading like wildfire. Even though everybody's been closed up in the house, we're doing the same thing other people did. Maybe it's the leadership. Am I far enough in the show that they won't censor us on some of our platforms for suggesting that it might be the fucking loose nut behind the wheel that's the reason that the car don't run?
Well, there it is. I think this is the point of the show. Let me make a marker here where we'll probably have to edit this off YouTube. Yes.
Well, no, I'm not even going to go any further. I've just said I'm suggesting that. I'll talk more about that idiot later on in the program. But anyway, we need to find this out. I know we have lawyers. We got a bunch of attorneys out there. We got one on staff, of course. The consigliere himself, Stephen P. Noob. We got a lot of attorneys that listen to the program. We need more medical feedback now. Why are there 4 times as many cases of coronavirus in the United States as there are in any other country in the world? Why are we just and why, for fuck's sake? Well, I think I know why, because I've talked about why New York City is just filthy. But for heaven's sake, you know, some other people around the world obviously sneeze on each other every once in a while. You wouldn't think that it would be this out of bounds. It's like the United States certainly blows all the rest of the countries around the world away when it comes to the big statistics. Anyway, but the virus has done one good thing. Have you heard about this? Have you read about this? The running of the bulls in Spain has been canceled.
I had not heard that, no.
I just saw this on the television. And I'm not even
you know
what?
I must have missed the first part of that story because I'm pretty sure I had the same channel on my TV a little while ago, but it was on mute because I was doing editing. And I look up and I just see on the Cryon, it says bullfighting industry struggling with coronavirus. And I'm thinking, who gives a shit about the bullfighting industry?
Well, that's what I was going to say when they canceled the running of the bulls. I'm not happy for the stupid, dumb fucking humans that are not going to get run over and gored and trampled and speared and otherwise sent to the fucking bullfighting promised land that they belong in for being stupid. But I feel bad for the bulls because that's the one day of the year they actually get to get even with these pricks for the way that they're treated all year round. So it's good for some people, but bad for the bulls. Anyway, speaking of being good for some and bad for others, we've talked on almost every program, and hopefully this is coming to an end. We've talked on almost every program for the last month or so about the update, the crisis update at Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com. Especially if you've got a vested interest in this, if you've sent me money over the last month, you might want to perk your ears up just for a minute. As we announced last week, I don't know how it's going to be done. I'm still not understanding how it's going to be done, but at JimCornette.com, they're going to disable the Cornette's Collectibles store. You're not going to be able to make an order from today, Friday, May the 1st, through May the 14th. They're going to do it in some fashion where it doesn't cause the website to fucking go off the air or crash in flames or whatever, but you won't be able to order things. And I don't understand how it's going to happen, but I've been assured of this. And not only that, but we've got going to have a big bright banner up on the front page that announces this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Because of incessant demand over the last few weeks, we are closed from May 1st through 14th. And I know some people are still going to be emailing me or tweeting me, hey, I can't order stuff on your site, even though they're the same people that when they're plummeting in their fucking Chevy Cavalier off the edge of a fucking cliff into a ravine, they wonder, whoa, all we saw was the sign that said road closed. So please don't get mad at me if you can't figure out how to order off the store for the next 2 weeks because you're not supposed to. And then we will reopen on May 15th with a fresh outlook on life. And once again, I can say if you have ordered from Cornette's Collectibles before April the 12th, it is almost a certainty that all of your stuff has been sent out or has already arrived in your greasy little hands. And hundreds and hundreds of you from April 12th through April 19th have had your orders filled, but hundreds of you have not. And after April 20th, I don't know that anybody's gotten anything. But that's what we're going to be doing over the next 2 weeks, folks. We're going to be catching up. We've already restocked to handle this demand. We're going to be taking another inventory, but we've got in tons more books and T-shirts. The Houston Wrestling DVDs have been restocked. So we're going to be filling all this stuff, and then we're going to be reopening on May 15th, all caught up and with nobody pissed off at us for not getting them their shit in a timely manner. That is the goal. And so we appreciate your patience while we undergo these growing pains, or groin pains. Maybe it felt like somebody kicked me in the balls. I had groin pains. I was like, oh God, how am I going to? I figured out, Brian, if I spent 1 minute on each item that everybody ordered in the month of April, just autographing it and putting in an envelope, and obviously there's more to the process than that, it would have taken me 120 hours straight if I didn't take a break or slept or ate, but I could have filled everything.
Oh, man. Well, thank God Stacy knows how to forge your signature.
Hey, now, don't start bandying stuff like that. No, ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you, everything is legitimate.
Does anyone request no signature on the item?
You know, actually, the first time ever, because normally you can ask for things to be personalized any way you want. And I'm not doing a sales pitch now, folks. We're closed. I'm just telling you the ways that it is. You can say I get tons of fuck Trump and fuck Shitstain and whatever, but you can ask me to personalize it in any fashion. But if you don't ask for a specific personalization, I just simply sign the various items. But only one person has said, no, don't autograph it at all. And that was a couple weeks ago. They were DVDs, and I'm thinking he didn't want the covers marred with my greasy signature. But only not otherwise. Now I guess we'll start a trend. No, don't sign that fucking thing.
Well, no, because I think I'm one of those people when I collect things. It's one thing if you have an 8x10 with an autograph photo, but if you have something that's a collectible, and of course that is only what you find at Cornette's Collectibles, you may not want a signature on it, even if it is someone cool or something that was historically important. You may want it to be immaculate. You may want it to be clean. You may want it without a signature. I do.
Well, and I'm with you. And of course, with books, the behind the curtains, I do the covers across the title because it's right above my name, and that and there's a spot and it stands out, but at the same time doesn't mar the look of the book. With the other books, I always do them on the title page inside. I like to sign 8x10s or the Cult of Cornette membership certificates. Obviously, that's the whole idea. I fill in your name and sign it, etc. But I hate signing DVDs because you got no room and the plastic and it blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't stand out. So I always do sign the DVDs for folks, but I those are the ones that if I didn't want to sign something, I wouldn't sign a DVD.
In the first 4 months of this year, do you know how many Sharpies you've gone through?
No, because I've got a bag outside there's like 100, 150, and what I do is I take them and I have multiple purposes for them. Now you're going to put on YouTube Jim Cornette on Sharpies. It'll get 50,000 fucking. But I have the new ones with the good points, and I try to always use them on autograph pictures or, something that requires a finer point, or I'm going to do more writing. And then as they get more blunt, well, then they go to because the DVD covers need to stand out a bit more and have a bit a blunter tip. And so I cycle through them. So they're in various stages of going through depending on the task at hand. There, and Jim Cornette on Sharpies.
All right. I think we'll skip that video, but I like the way you're thinking.
Anyway, all right. But anyway, I'm trying to. I'm finished. Am I finished? Was I finished with this? The point is, folks, thank you so much for the increased business over the last several months, and especially during the quarantine. People wanting their wrestling entertainment. And I'm going to get caught back up, and we're going to get this stuff, the store back up on May 15th and ready to deal with future orders. And I'm not going to start any panics. There may even be a handful of wrestling gold sets left. When I got down to where, because they were coming in faster than I could count, and we were still assembling all these individual DVDs into sets. So I think it got within about 50 of where I thought, well, shit, we're going to run out of these. I just take it off. We can't deal with it anymore. It's that, along with all the other fine quality products. But anyway, we'll be back on May 15th. I have an email from one of the Cult of Cornette listeners that now will change, and instead of being commercial, will be a little bit more personal. And I'm not going to give the guy's full name, but it's Terry. Dear Jim, I don't know where to begin. I'm from Oklahoma, but have recently moved to Granbury, Texas for work reasons. Well, I guess I wonder if that's narrowing it down too much. Well, Granbury's a big town. I've been listening to your podcast for about a year now, and I love every minute of it. It reminds me of the things my dad used to talk about. That's why I'm sending this. Today, April 24th, marks 1 year since he passed away from liver cancer. We found out last March, and within a month, he was gone. He was a huge fan of wrestling. He always talked about what he watched back in the day. He talked about world class and Mid-South wrestling. He was a big fan of the Von Erichs, the Freebirds, the Rock and Roll Express, and the list goes on. He got my brothers and I into wrestling. I just want to say thank you. Listening to your shows reminds me of the times I spent with him growing up and watching wrestling. My two older brothers, myself, and our dad got to meet you at the Rock and Roll Express, along with a few others in Shawnee, Oklahoma, at Oklahomania back in 2016. I remember that. There weren't many people besides you in the audience there, so I think I remember that. But I cherish those memories. It was really the last big thing we did wrestling event-wise before he passed away. Again, thank you for bringing some joy and great memories back for me during a time where I'm really missing my dad. And that's a cool thing to hear, not only because it puts us over our program and that we are figuring out some way, I have no idea why or how, to entertain people, but also this goes back to what we talked about that is missing in wrestling now in so many places. It was not only multiple generations of families being fans at the same time, but parents getting to take their kids to the matches in their hometown when the same thing as their parents did for them when they were kids, and pass that on. And now, except for the intermittent fan fest or something, you don't really get to do that anymore. And that's, and the pictures of, God, there's been several of them on Twitter that I've retweeted or commented on here lately, of the old ladies and the grannies and just the old people and the old people with babies on their laps, and the white grandmother sitting next to the black cab driver at the Memphis Coliseum. Those pictures of the crowds. We've lost all those people except for a specific niche audience, as they like to say, of the same type of people when there was a crowd. And, so at least, this email got over with me because Terry got a chance to do something like that with his dad and his brothers did. And more importantly, I think his dad got to do that with them, because his dad was the one who grew up with wrestling and watched all those territories, and he wouldn't have gotten to take them to see anything now, because there is nothing regular local now everywhere in the country. So at least he got to go to a fan fest and see some of the guys that he, remembered watching with his kids, even if they were already grown up by the time it happened. You know what I'm saying, Brian?
I do. How many of the people who were senior citizen fans in the 70s or 80s do you think got into it because of wrestling being on national TV in the 50s?
A lot of the women, definitely. Like, Bouncing Beulah. Did you see the article on Twitter that they reprinted from the Dayton newspaper in 1951, where she was a young woman, but she was noted for sitting in the front row of the TV matches in Dayton and bouncing up and down? And fucking 45 years later, she's on Nitro in Hulk Hogan's face. That was fucking great. And according to the Armstrongs, she was a hell of a cook, too. All the Armstrongs and like Tracy Smothers, the extended Armstrong family, the rock and roll, the baby faces, when there was a weekend in Knoxville where they had time and the towns were short, they would go to Beulah's house on Sunday or Saturday or whatever for a big dinner. Anyway, yeah, the women definitely got into wrestling from network television in the 50s. Some of the guys already, because that was like a guy's thing to do, a night out, go to the wrestling matches or the boxing matches. I remember one old man in the Louisville Gardens when Billy Robinson wrestled Lou Thez at the Gardens in 1981. I actually saw that match live. Of course, now Thez was 65 60, and Robinson was, he was 65, what, 1981?
No, I was about to say 60 something. And jumped in with 65. Yeah.
Well, 65, and Robinson was in his mid to late 40s. But it was still cool, and Thez took the backbreaker. Anyway, the old man, as his fucking Robinson was walking down the fucking aisle, the old man was getting on him. Well, you couldn't have handled him 20 years ago, because he'd seen Thez when he was, a rookie coming over to the fucking Armory in Louisville, the same building that was the Gardens later on. And he remembered Blacksmith Pedigo, for Christ's sake. Those were pre-TV fucking local wrestlers in Louisville in the 40s. And, those people that were senior citizens in the 70s and 80s had been watching wrestling since, they were young people. And but we don't get as many, and we don't keep them as long anymore. Wonder why? I can't imagine. It's not, and some people, here's what pisses me off. Some people that actually allegedly call themselves wrestling fans today will actually knock the wrestling fans of yesterday and say, well, it's just because people aren't stupid like they were back then and believed all this stuff, and they were rednecks that you could pull the wool over their eyes. We're smarter now. You fucking morons. Yeah, these people 30 years ago, if you'd had a match with the Invisible Man or a guy with hands in his pockets or whatever the fuck tomfoolery goes on in today's environment, they would have rioted and set the ring on fire. Their intelligence would have been so insulted. But now you people are calling them stupid just because they wanted the shit to look good and make sense. At this point, a broomstick would be a better leader than Donald Trump. I wonder where we could place that bet. What about my bookie? Would they take that bet?
Oh, they may. They may take that bet, and many, many others.
Well, I know they take many others. I used to think if I changed my name to Many Others, I'd get booked more because he was on every other fucking show, right? Many others. But sports have come to a screeching halt. Basketball has been benched. Pitchers are off the mound. Catchers can't squat, but our friends at my bookie aren't going to let you down, folks. What's the matter with you?
What is this read? I'm sorry.
You can stay sane and stay entertained with access. If a catcher can't squat,
oh my God,
that just takes the fun out of his whole day. Stay sane, stay entertained with access to your favorite games like blackjack, roulette, slots, video poker, or if your favorite squad has been sidelined because of the pandemic, my bookie has partnered. What?
You not just said, your favorite squad? You just said if your favorite squad has been sidelined.
I said squad. If your favorite squad has been sidelined.
That's not what you said.
Because of the pandemic. Damn it. Because of the pandemic. My bookie has partnered with some of the leading esports brands to bring you wagers. Now, you cocksucker. Bring you wagers on virtual action straight from the court, NBA 2K20, all the stuff that me and Brian last don't know how it works. You can play the squat machines. You can even bet on your squat, even if your squat's been benched, all of it. and more at mybookie.ag, and use the promo code JCE, and you get 150% bonus on your first casino deposit. Promo code JCE at mybookie.ag. 150% cash bonus on your first deposit, all the way up to $750. You spin, you win, and you get paid. You take that money. You don't walk out of the casino because you ain't in one. You're already in your own home. You can squat down right there, and you can celebrate with a good old-fashioned squat that you've won money from MyBookie.
It's better than being in a casino where you have all those old people smoking cigarettes everywhere. It's awful.
Well, and I tried to take a squat one time in a casino, and they firmly suggested that I take my business elsewhere. It was frowned on in that environment.
Right.
Oh, golly. You know, I used to like to, I didn't really bet, but I'd like when we'd go to the casinos, for shows or whatever. Because, I like to play the video poker like a video game. Not that I'm going to win any money or anything, but just use $10 in quarters, see how long I can play. Were you ever in the cards? Were you ever in the poker or blackjack or anything? No, not really. Especially, not to bet money or whatever. After I've done the MyBookie spot, but I like the video poker but the casinos are they're interesting places because you got food all the time. You got activity going on. You don't know what time of day or night it is. At the Showboat in Las Vegas, when we went out and worked with the original Midnight Express, I remember this young lady just bumped into her in the lobby, and she came back to my room and spent the better part of an hour helping me find a $100 bill that I'd lost. And just the friendliest people that you can meet there, and they'll just do anything for you.
Well, hold on. I'm going to get past the Randy part of the story here. You worked?
No, Randy Rose was still with the team then. Yeah, Randy Rose and Dennis Condrey were the original Midnight.
You did Midnight at the Showboat?
Yes.
I didn't realize. I didn't realize that. Wow.
Oh, that was the best night of Heyman's life. That he was over the moon. He was 6 inches off the ground because the original Midnight had been working the AWA for over a year before they came to work for Crockett, and that's where they were doing AWA TV. That's where they'd done all their big matches and won the belt and everything, was at the Showboat. That's why he was especially pissed off. That was the weekend we did the Swing Out West, and it was our first weekend of house shows with the original Midnight after we'd done the Angle and it busted me open in whole 9 yards. That's the weekend Dusty didn't come. He had got fired. We didn't know it yet. And we go out and we find out that we're on the second match, and they tell us do a 20-minute Broadway. And we were, what the fuck? When's the last time a fucking Hot Angle match went on a show second and did a 20-minute Broadway? What the fuck? What's up? And the first night, we saved it at the Showboat because the thing was so over. Paulie tells a story, and actually I was there when it happened, so is the only reason I believe it. But I can testify this one thing that Paulie has said was true. The people were so into this goddamn match in the closing stretch when the fucking original Midnight, when my Midnight was making their comeback and they were going into the thing, before they knew they were going to see a fucking blah-ass fucking 20-minute draw finish. This guy had a fucking beer in a beer cup sitting on the seat next to him, and the people were because his wife had gone somewhere. And the people are stomping their feet and they're making so much noise, the beer vibrated off the fucking chair. Oh, God. But the match got over huge, and they didn't even really mind the fucking Broadway because me and Bobby and Stan called that they would jump us afterwards when I was trying to fucking do something with Bobby or whatever. They jump us from behind and get a little heat on us afterwards. We left that way. Then the next night God damn it, I don't have my book in front of me. I believe the next night was in Oakland or San Francisco, one or the other, and the people weren't so kind because it was a brand new market for us, really, and also it was a 20-minute Broadway. What the fuck? And that's where because then in Albuquerque, that's when I changed the finish and we bullied the referee into disqualifying us at 19:30. and we did some heat afterwards, and then that's when JJ got mad at us. But anyway, nevertheless.
Was JJ running those cards with Dusty Fire?
Yes, JJ was running the cards. And that's why when we changed the finish, he had to tell us, well, go home until you talk to Jimmy Crockett. As well, if Jimmy Crockett wants to talk to us, he's got our fucking phone number. But then I called Flair because we're technically, they're sending us home, and we changed the finish. They're sending us home, telling us to call the boss. We're going home and the boss can call us. Fuck this bullshit. And so I called Flair to see because he wasn't on the trip either for whatever fucking reason. Because I called him. Maybe he was just staying at a ritzy hotel in town. I don't know. But anyway, he said, oh, call Jimmy Crockett. So I did. And that's when Jimmy told me, well, that Dusty's been let go and we're in a period of change and we didn't want to do anything. Basically, they didn't want to do anything with the angle because now that Dusty was gone, I had sold Dusty on the angle and he had shot it, so he would have supported it. But we would later find out that Jimmy Crockett, who was now technically in charge in the interim, didn't like Randy Rose and didn't really like fucking Angle. I think he's probably still mad at Dennis for fucking walking out on him. Who knows? But he's the one that started cutting it off and doing the 20-minute Broadway finishes and shit. And then Hurd picked up, and George Scott picked up the following month and we were toast. But so anyway, we ended up not coming back to Charlotte, but going back. And he said, just go back and have the rest of the matches and, we'll talk when we get back to Charlotte or whatever. All right. So he calmed us down a little bit. But anyway, the point is, the original point of that story was that was the greatest night of Paulie's life, that match got. He had never been involved in a match probably that got over like that because they were already over in Las Vegas, but now they're in the ring with Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, and we're doing the whole midnight thing off TV. So the people bought that. And they liked it there in Vegas that night at the Showboat. And then the young lady helped me find that $100 bill that had somehow mysteriously ended up underneath the Gideon Bible on the dresser.
Oh, my God. She's a very friendly lady. I've heard about her. She helped Wally Carbo find $50 8 times in the preceding years.
But I was about to say, if it was Wally Carbo at that point in time, it probably would have been 8 times over a period of 8 months. Anyway,
I heard Flair was at the Ritzy Hotel. He lost $5,000.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of
that girl was friendly and son of a gun. Right after Flair left Vegas, her kids went to college. I don't know how. But anyway, before we get into anything meaningful. Not that there's been any danger of that so far in this program, but let's talk about Dick Boy's tweet. Do you want to do that for a minute?
Well, I guess the story is, out of nowhere, I don't know where this came from, a clip was posted.
Apropos of nothing.
A clip was posted of Vader working with an underneath guy on WCW TV years ago. Vader had the guy. It was
WWF, I think, TV.
Oh, was it? See, I didn't even watch the clip. I just saw the photo.
Well, yes, it was WWF TV.
Well, it was Vader throwing those shots he would throw in the corner. And at that point, a wrestler some of you may have heard of, Little Joey Ryan, had some thoughts about all this.
I wasn't going to mention his name. I was just going to say Dick Boy because we don't want him to get any attention. You might have to edit that out. But the point is, Dick Boy's tweet, and I don't have it in front of me. I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but it's the same old shit that comes out of his mouth every time he wants some attention from these people that like this kind of thing. Well, I'm just so glad that wrestling has evolved from the barbaric days where that bully culture in wrestling allowed things like this to go on. Because the controversy was that, like we said last week here on the program, old Kenny Olivier over there on the other channel had a match with a job guy, and the guy was kicking out of shit, and he was doing shit that was over and above the level of what a guy presented like that in that environment should have been doing with the alleged world's greatest wrestling fucking artist, right? And, of course, Uncle Dave came to Olivier's defense. Well, things would change. Say that about Ric Flair and George South. Well, it was Ric Flair with George South, and Flair was already over. Flair just didn't do it with every goddamn job guy he got in the ring with just to prove he could. just some fucking buggy whip armed fucking sway back fucking mare. He didn't do it with everybody. He did it with the guys that he liked that actually could really work. And it still was wrong, but not as wrong. But nevertheless, Dick Boy, his take on it is, well, it's better that Olivier do that than this barbaric display, the bully culture, where you'd have to put up with it, or you'd lose your job, you'd be blackballed or blacklisted. And he put up the clip of Leon in the corner, and the guy in the corner was Tim McNeely, as we'll find out here in a minute. And it was Vader being Vader, doing Vader shit, right? And so I saw this when I first got up on whatever day that was, Monday or Tuesday. I said, hey, morning thoughts on Dick Boy. Any grown man who uses the phrase bully culture is a pussy. Secondly, you better be glad wrestling has changed, or elsewise you wouldn't be allowed in it. Thirdly, what was third? There's evolving and there's devolving. And fourth, what the fuck is the matter with you, you insufferable, whiny little douchebag? And everybody, and I mean, it was pretty fucking brutal. It not only jumps on Dick Boy on Twitter because he is, uses his little pee-pee in his matches and he's a joke and nobody likes him anyway, but also because he's knocking Vader for fucking a dead guy who can't defend himself for being a bully in some respect in this clip, and this guy's job hanging in the balance if he didn't take it. And so since Dick Boy got all fucking slapped down by everybody, which is his normal fucking pattern, he pokes his head up once in a while, people slap him in the face, and he jumps back in his fucking hole. But then he takes all day to come up with a response to me. Well, how am I going to get myself out of this hole? I'll do it, CTE. So he said, well, Jim, I know we'll never see wrestling eye to eye, but I can't believe that you'd pick this hill to die on with what we now know about CTE and brain injuries. And then guess who tweeted him back? Tim McNeely, the guy in the fucking clip. So what the fuck's the matter with you? He wasn't being stiff with me. Leon was never stiff. He was excitable, but he wasn't stiff with me. It was fine. I wasn't hurt. The guy that is in the clip that Dick Boy sends out as an example of Vader being a bully and giving people brain damage, them not being able to do anything about it because of the bully culture in wrestling, said, what the fuck, you Mark? It was a work. He didn't hurt me.
He is so stupid. Every time he tweets something out, he's the stupidest guy in the wrestling business.
Well, what it is he is like somebody that we just spoke about, and depending on what platform you're listening to this audio, you might not have heard it because it might have been too controversial for some places, and they take it out. But when you have someone who has recognized a group of stupid, gullible people, and you know what to say to appeal to those stupid, gullible people, then that's what you get. And whether it's the same people that, the CTE with what we know, and the bully culture, the same people about the bully culture also all over the all-inclusive culture that, it's for everybody, and everybody gets to play, and everybody gets to wrestle, and everybody gets to be free, and it's ridiculous not to think that they shouldn't. And the cosplay wrestling fans and the mud show aficionados hang on Dick Boy's words because he's a darling. He's the kind of guy who basically couldn't ever have done this at any level of success unless he's allowed to do stupid, preposterous shit that makes him the object of ridicule and some people laugh with instead of at. And he's allowed to do that now, which is why I crusade against it. He's identified that people that will go along with his silliness are people who are easily offended, get offended a lot, have all these fucking words and phrases for all this terrible behavior that people undergo, and so he sucks up to them. He doesn't really mean any of this shit. He's working the fucking guy they're all mad at, me. I'm the only one telling you the fucking truth. I don't like you, and I don't give a shit whether you like me. There's the fucking truth. This guy sucks up to people so they'll buy his fucking used lollipops. He pulls out of his fucking ass in his matches and sticks them in people's mouths. And here's another thing. Is it more of a bully culture that Leon or any other big monster of his day would go out and get over by working stiff, but hopefully safely, although shit happens, stiff but safely with guys and manhandle them and try to make it look real so at least they weren't part of a goddamn joke and they really got their ass kicked by this beast? Is that a bully culture, or is it a bully culture to say, hey, since Dick Boy runs all the dive bar shows there in California and he's in with the rest of the California fucking clique there, hey, if you want to get a job on my wrestling show here at this cheap bar, you're trying to make a name for yourself as a wrestler, you need all the bookings you can get, you got to grab my cock. And then you got to fling yourself all the way across the ring, or you've got to fucking open your mouth and let me stick a lollipop in it that I've just pulled out of my fucking crotch, or you can't get booked. Isn't that bullying? Or actually it's just fucking being a dick. Just a dick.
You know, it's funny. Someone did say something to me the other day. I won't say who, but someone in the wrestling business said that these Southern California guys, and the examples that were cited to me were Joey Ryan and the Young Bucks and a few other people. He said they're like the Clique, except minus the drugs and the alcohol. But they have no problem burying guys and holding guys back and screwing guys over. But, you know, they're not going to eat a bunch of pills while doing it.
Well, that's admirable of them. And as far as, and just because I know Dick Boy doesn't know how to work with a job guy because he's only been the job guy in that equation, but he doesn't know how a star works with a job guy. And neither does Uncle Dave, because Uncle Dave has never been in the ring. And, of course, his partner has been in the ring. His partner dwarfs Marco Stunt, but he's only been in the ring on independent events. So let me just smarten you up real quickly. Working competitively with a job guy when you're a main event guy can be done in a short fashion, in a short period of time, to show the guy's not a complete schlub, to give him some kind of life, but the emphasis needs to be on you. If one of the first matches, if not the first, matches that the Midnight Express worked on Mid-South Television for Bill Watts when we were brought in to be the top heel team, Mike Jackson was one of the opponents. I don't remember if it's the first match or just at the first taping, as we taped 2 or 3 matches. And so Mike and Bobby Eaton did a spot. I can't remember what it was, but Mike was hitting the ropes, and I think fucking got a goddamn leapfrog in, or may have arm dragged Bobby, or did a drop kick or whatever, and then they cut him off. Because he could do shit, and he was made somewhat credible, but these other guys are just better. And then they won in dominant fashion. Another one of the opponents that we had at our first taping was Lanny Poffo. And, of course, since Lanny was, you know, back then he hadn't had the WWF run, but he was an experienced pro. So he got some shit in. He leapfrogged and drop kicked and did something, and then they cut him off. And it might have beat the other guy. Or well, a couple times we beat Lanny. It was a small territory. But the point is, just because Lanny Poffo was able to do things, or Mike Jackson was able to do things, if Bobby Eaton or Dennis Condrey had gone out there and fucking Bobby had shot Lanny into the corner and charged in, and Lanny had put his feet up and fucking booted Bobby, and Bobby had gone down, and Lanny had jumped up and done a moonsault off the top, boom, 1, 2, and Bobby had kicked out, and Lanny had arm dragged him and hip tossed him and body slammed him and grabbed his arm and controlled him and tagged his partner. When we got back, Bill Watts would have fired all of us. Every single last one, including the referee. Because that's not what he wanted, regardless whether it could be executed properly or not. So there's ways you can work with a job guy, and they don't include hitting them with 2 or 3 high-impact moves and them either kicking out, or in some cases, you're picking them up to giving them another move, which we'll talk about on AEW here in a second. But one of the guys fucking caught one of their goddamn, child wrestlers with a big fucking move off the top and planted him where it looked like he should have been paralyzed and carted out on a stretcher and then picked him up so he could hit his finish on him. Fucking hell. But anyway, it can be done. You can give the guy something, but you can still, Lawler was a master at it. A lot of the top guys were masters at it. The guys that had to go out in their home territories on their TVs and do 8 or 10 minutes with underneath or middle card or preliminary or job guys just to get exposure on their television. They were also the bookers, so they would have a good basic match. They'd give the guy a little bit. They'd stay in control most of the time, but just the way it worked out, they didn't have to hit any of their big moves until the end. Maybe if the guy fired up, then they'd shut him down and be mad enough to put him away. It can be done. But Kenny Olivier don't know how to do it. And what Vader was doing was getting Vader over. And yes, I'm not saying he never threw a potato. And you could tell also with Yokozuna on some of those bonsai drops, whether it was all Yoko going to get over and fuck this guy's fucking chest, or I'm going to take care of this guy because he's nice to me or whatever. But for fuck's sake, as part of fucking wrestling, just because some fucking penis performer that couldn't even have done this 15 years ago at any level and been a success in any way is allowed to hoke it up and do some vaudeville bullshit and gets his pussy powdered and or needs to get his pussy powdered whenever he gets offended by some fucking fictitious thing that he's made up. Just face it. Dick boy, you weren't man enough to be in this business when the men were in the business. You're man enough to be in a business full of boys, which is why you keep to the same social circle.
Yes. Have fun and impact.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Make an impact and impact. Real quick, the Dark Side of the Ring episode was on David Schultz this past week. And the slap heard around the world. And I swear to God, it's like Christmas has come early for me, Brian, because for years I've been saying things, and some people foolishly didn't believe me. But I have been vindicated here of late on national television from the perpetrator's own lips. Not only has the Archbishop of Talentberry outed himself as a complete flaming asshole on national television, but now we see that both Eddie Mansfield and John Stossel are both gonorrhea drip-ridden dicks. Basically, they appealed to absolutely no one with their smart-ass fucking attitude, and in Stossel's case, a complete admission that he was a lying con man. The guy who said he wanted to expose people, expose wrestling because he didn't like people being bullshitted, is the same guy that admitted that he, as soon as he got his fucking lawsuit settlement, his hearing cleared up. How do you have the balls to crusade against people being bullshitted when apparently I'd not heard of John Stossel in fucking 30 years because I don't watch Fox News. Apparently that's where he's been hiding. How do you have the balls to crusade against people being bullshitted and you work publicly for Fox News, the biggest source of bullshit in the United States of America and the English-speaking world? So Stossel is a fucking asshole and a con man and a liar that was trying to expose bullshit. And Mansfield is just a fucking asshole who also thinks that Abraham Lincoln should have freed the wrestlers along with the slaves. It's been a great month, Brian.
I guess so.
But I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that I like being right. It just happens so often I get used to it. But I've had countless emails and tweets and everything. Well, now that we've actually seen Shitstain on television, on that Brawl for All episode, we get an idea of what you had to put up with, we understand. Now, I never even met Eddie Mansfield, but I've hated him ever since 1985, and I've never met John Stossel, but I've hated him since 1985. I've said they were both fucking dicks. And there you go. And Mansfield was a con man. He was a disgruntled but they didn't use my entire promo. I think that's going to be on a deleted scene. But he was a has-been, never was, who couldn't make it and got pissed and decided, I'll just fuck with everybody. And that's what he was until now. He's tried to revise history like so many people do in this business. I did it for the boys. I wanted everybody to be treated. But what? No. Do you think Eddie Mansfield, an unknown fucking outside of the state of Georgia fucking underneath preliminary wrestler, going on 2020, cutting his head with a razor blade and telling everybody wrestling was fixed, was going to unionize wrestling right before the first WrestleMania when Hulk Hogan and everybody else was saying, fuck you? No, he wasn't going to do anything for the wrestling business. He didn't have the power to do anything for the wrestling business. He didn't have the opportunity to do anything for the wrestling business. He had the opportunity to do something for himself, to get himself some publicity and get even with some people he wanted to get even with. And he's been a slime ball ever since. And the only other people that he ever worked for in the wrestling business was when he conned somebody into somehow backing him to do a promotion in Florida for a year or two. Otherwise, he's been out of wrestling and he never returned, and that's the fucking best thing for him. But now everybody sees he's a goddamn raven fucking idiot also. So I love the power of television. Bringing you assholes fucking right up in your living room where you can get a good swift smell of their bullshit. But Schultz, meanwhile, he should have been why was Schultz not Dog the Bounty Hunter? He could have had the fucking reality show if he'd have had the goddamn production company. It could have been 20 years beforehand, which some of that footage, that's where it was from, is they shot him for television. But he should have been the Bounty Hunter reality show, don't you think? It would have been better promos and no fucking, fat wife and fucking annoying family to get in the way.
It would have been good.
Either that or they could bring back Dog the Bounty Hunter as a series, but get Diamond Dallas Page to play him.
What?
Well, think about it. Diamond Dallas Page and Dog the Bounty Hunter. There's gimmick infringement on some side or another. We ought to go back and figure out who had this look first. Dog the Bounty Hunter and Diamond Dallas Page. Put them side by side. Now you won't be able to unsee it. Anyway, one thing they clipped out of the David Schultz episode was they showed the little clip of the Hogan Belzer thing. Have I ever told you this story? I told it to them. They didn't use it. So I'm going to tell it now. But have I told you?
I'm not sure because I don't know exactly what you're going to say.
Well, how long has it been since I told you? The ending may have changed. Anyway, when Hogan and Mr. T were on the Richard Belzer show and he put Belzer in the front face lock.
Hot Properties.
Yes, Hot Properties. And I saw that while I was living in Dallas and I taped the show and watched it back when I got back from a fucking match. But anyway, he only had the fucking front face lock on for just a couple of seconds. And he didn't realize that he was going to put Richard Belzer out. He thought he was only going to cause him a little discomfort. But you know why Richard Belzer, and if I'm slandering a public person, is Richard Belzer still alive?
Oh yeah, he's still alive.
Does he do anything important? Does he have enough money to hire a lawyer?
He's got lots of money. He has lots of NBC money.
Okay.
Do you know what the name of his house is in France?
I didn't know he had a house in France.
Well, he bought it after the lawsuit. He named it Shea Hogan.
Oh, for God's sake. All right. Well, then in that case, maybe that's why they didn't use this story on the dark side. But let's just say that a TV host asks a well-known wrestler to put a hold on him, and the well-known wrestler wants to give him a little respect for the wrestling business. He puts a front face lock on and he cinches up a little bit. But he doesn't cinch up long enough that he should have gone out, right? This fictitious TV host drops like a fucking stone and is unconscious. It's a scientific fact. I don't know if everybody's aware of this or not, but the harder that your blood is pumping, the quicker you go out in a rear naked choke or a sleeper or whatever that's designed to put you out. The harder, the more blowed up you are and the harder your blood is pumping, the quicker you're going to go out. Now, if there was artificial substances in someone's bloodstream. It was the 80s in this fictitious scenario that I'm talking about. If somebody was coked to the gills in a situation like that and they just got cinched up on a little bit in a front face lock, they'd go out quicker than that. And that's what I think, because you see the look on this fictitious wrestler's face when he's like, oh, fuck, he's already gone. And when he let him go, and you see this fictitious television host from the 80s who may or may not have been coked to the gills just fucking drop, I guarantee you his heart rate was high, that fictitious television personality. For whatever reason, he had a very high heart rate when that hold was cinched up on.
Didn't that fictitious wrestler from Venice Beach, California, put that same maneuver on Vern Gagne backstage at the AWA before he left? Did you ever hear that story?
Well, are you asking, was the story ever told, and did I hear it, or did it actually happen?
Any variation of that. First of all, I'll just say the name, Hulk Hogan. If there's anything you hear from Hulk Hogan's lips, you have to assume right away that it's a lie. I hate to say that, but...
Well, there was some story in his book or somewhere that he told or related about having to take care of Vern when Vern got upset at him somehow. Is this what you're referring to?
I had never heard it from his book. I had heard it from other sources.
Or somehow I heard, yeah. Well, it's like Paul Lee's story when he cussed out Vern Gagne. He called me and told me, oh, and I told him, you old man, and this and that and the other thing, and this is just all the ways that his promotion should be run, and it's not run. He just cussed and ranted and raved at Vern Gagne. I'm like, what the fuck? And of course, if everybody else that I could find to confirm that said, we've never seen anything like that happen in public. And then I saw it in person myself when he had cut the promo on Flair. 20 seconds after Flair had cut a promo on him and left the room and closed the door behind him. And then Paul started. So I'm one of those promos. I think it's the same thing. I think Hogan, I don't care how old Vern Gagne was. I don't think that he got a front face lock put on him by Hulk Hogan and it didn't make front page news in the wrestling world at the time. And he came out on the better end of it. An former NCAA champion against Hulk Hogan.
David Schultz told me a story on 605. I asked him about the story that, he was one of the first guys rated. When Vince went after the AWA, he got Hogan. Hogan insisted on some people being brought over. Gene Okerlund, David Schultz. A lot of people forget Jerry Blackwell, who backed out of the taping. He decided not to do it at the last minute. But Jerry Blackwell was one of the first guys rated from the AWA. And Schultz actually showed up at TV.
And as a matter of fact, Blackwell never had a run after that, did he?
He stayed in the AWA.
Yeah.
He stayed in the AWA. I think his health may have been an issue also from that point forward. But David Schultz showed up at TV after all this went down. And he went at it with Vern and had like a screaming match with him. And David admitted to me on 605, he goes, you know what? I'm glad he didn't make a move on me because he, even at his old age, he would have kicked my ass. Like David admitted it, So.
Well, yeah, but see, now I believe that Schultz fucking went and gave a promo to Vern. I can believe that entirely. But yeah, and yeah, that's what people don't understand when Hogan he's once again, he's like the other guy. We'll use that phrase, the other guy. He just talks out of his ass when he's on a program telling stories. And so, whether it was I used to actually wrestle twice a day because I'd fly around the world from Japan to the fucking New York and I'd wrestle twice in the same day. So I wrestled 700 times a year or whatever. It's fucking lunacy. But some people will believe it because, why would he lie? Why wouldn't he lie if you've studied anything about his fucking life and career?
Why did they include that clip of him on that episode? It made no sense.
Which clip?
The one at the end where he was given the Mr. T story. His version of the Mr. T story.
Oh, I don't know. I do not know.
Why? I don't know. When you have guys with no credibility, you shouldn't be including their words in your piece. I don't know.
Well, but anyway, before we get off on a tangent here, but David Schultz is a very entertaining motherfucker. And I thoroughly enjoyed once again. And also, I not only enjoyed seeing him slapping Stossel again, but also I just realized a couple of days ago, there was no Twitter in 1985. I didn't have John Stossel's phone number. I couldn't call him up and tell him what a piece of shit he was, and I hoped he got run over by a bus on Broadway. But now we have Twitter, so I just added him. Hey, John Stossel, after 35 years, I can tell you you're a piece of shit. You whiny little fucking bitch. You got what you deserved. If anybody ever fit the term plaintiff, it's you. He just looks like a fucking plaintiff with a plea. He pleads for people to help him complain because he's a plaintiff. John Stossel. Fuck. Anyway, what's going on in the wide world of the WWE? Now, what, a week or two ago, we said they're going to do TV live every week. Vince don't give a shit. You know, fuck the pandemic. Now they're only going to go live every 2 weeks, which means that people have just enough time to be quarantined in between before they go back and do it again. People are rumoring they're going to sell the WWE to Walt Disney or even his brother Roy. What's going on, Brian? You're the one that tells me what's happening in the world.
I'm not too sure what's going on with the sale rumors. From the best of what I've seen, I think it all disseminates from a tweet that Dutch Mantel shot out there. And it sounded like from reading that tweet, Dutch really didn't know anything either, that it was just a tweet put out there. I don't know why.
Are you insinuating that the Dirty Dutchman would just tweet something just to stir a bunch of people up and then sit back and laugh at him?
I'm insinuating that I don't think the WWE is going to be sold in the next month to Disney and Fox.
Well, now, if they're bidding against each other, I can see them wanting to play it out even longer. But so now they're going to do TV every 2 weeks. But how is that going to, is it going to be, they're going to do a live and then a tape on Raw and then a live and a tape and a SmackDown. They're going to have to keep the crews separate, right? Or elsewise, some people that whole week would be tied up wherever. How is that going to fucking work?
I don't know. I mean, you know, you have a little bit less of a problem than you would have in the old days because half the crew's married to the other half of the crew. But I tried to watch some of their TV this past week, and I gave it up right away. As much as I like watching Zelina Vega, and she is gorgeous, I hate that show. It is unwatchable. Just awful. Awful wrestling. So I turned it off.
Well, it's so sterile, and just at least AEW has found the atmosphere. The small room with enough people out in the building to make an audience and have some feedback and a kind of Fight Club feel rather than just all the cleanliness and just sterility and silence of everything I've seen. Are they still doing that? The WWE, just a completely empty building and nobody's allowed to make any noise?
That's the way it seemed when I watched Raw for about 3 minutes this past week. I think every company right now should be bidding for the rights to Billy Gunn and his son. I've become such a fan of Billy Gunn, not in the ring, but just him as a fan in the crowd. Him and his son. I love it. And Britt Baker.
My God, he said, I'll show you energy. I'll be out here clapping till the fucking last bump. And what the fuck is just, has anybody got any further word on Vince looking frail and et cetera on that Triple H celebration? We talked about that. Is there any other news on whether Vince is okay or not?
No, that's just Vince. That's the current state of Vince.
You know what Vince needs, don't you?
I can think of a few.
He needs a fine quality product that will extend endurance, improve energy and stamina, increase oxygen delivery throughout his body. He needs Beat Elite.
Yes, Beat Elite. I've been taking it every single day.
How do you prepare that fine product, Brian Last?
Well, you get a nice glass of water and you put the Beat Elite into it and you mix it all around and you drink it down and all of a sudden you have boundless amounts of energy.
Yes, that's what I was trying to get you to do. Was say it's so easy. Just get you a glass of water, dump the Beat Elite in the water, mix it around, and you sounded like you were doing the hokey pokey there. You mix it all around and you drink it all down. But it works on increasing blood flow, oxygen transport, helps you on a workout. Or if you're like me and you're not going to be working out, it helps you do orders. It helps you get up off the couch, gives you some energy. It works for Stace. It works for the entire Last Manor family. It can work for you. Go. Don't wait. Go to Live Human, LIVEHUMAN, livehuman.com/JCE and get 20% off your first purchase of Beat Elite. The team at Human is making this offer exclusive to the Cult of Cornette out there only. You won't find a deal like this anywhere else because we're the only ones that can twist these people's arm and save you money. livehuman.com/JCE for Beat Elite for more energy, more stamina, and a better, healthy overall outlook on life. And you'll be even better than Vince McMahon.
I was going to say, if you're a WWE fan, buy some and send it to Titan Tower. They're going to be there for a while.
My. Well, yeah, and send it to fucking Vince because he needs something. Holy mackerel. Anyway, what are you doing this week before we talk about all this modern wrestling?
Another action-packed week on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. All shows available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast. Get more information on Twitter at Superpodcast or on Facebook.
Now quit it now. Quit it now because the people don't know. People out there in podcast land don't know that we had to make a slight edit to take a break for a second and tickled ourselves, and now you are being ticklish. Now you were talking about the 605 Super Podcast, the mothership.
Facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. This week, a few highlights on Ron Fuller's Super Studcast, available for patrons of the Studcast at Patreon.com/Studcast. Part 2 of Ron's conversation with Jacques Rougeau. He goes in depth of talking all about the Dynamite Kid incident. There's a lot more stuff on there, but I think everyone's going to want to hear this. Jacques Rougeau and the Tennessee Stud talking about the famous 1988 incident or series of incidents between the Rougeaus, specifically Jacques, and the Bulldogs, specifically Dynamite Kid. Hear that today, Patreon.com/Studcast. This week on Breaking Kayfabe with Baldrin and Barry, Jeff Baldrin is reunited with an old friend of his, Dave Meltzer. Hear them talk about wrestling in the 80s, Japan, and food at BaldrinPod.com, or available wherever you find your favorite podcast. I really wanted to talk to you about this one, Jim. This week on John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight, Then and Now, of course, each and every week, John and I go back and listen to the original broadcast from his groundbreaking radio show, Pro Wrestling Spotlight. We are now up to, I believe the date here, February 18th, 1989. So this is a week before Wrestle War, a week after Sting got hurt. And while going over the big news of the week, and there was a lot of things going on, there was something that I heard, and I said, I really want to get Jim's opinion on this and find out what was happening behind the scenes, because I know a lot of things happened in a short period of time with the booking committee, with Jim Herd, with various contracts. So if you don't mind, can I play you a clip here? It'll be a couple minutes and get your opinion on it.
Please do.
In the NWA this week, it was a very hectic week. A lot of wrestlers have lost their contracts. A lot of contracts were not renewed, and these include the Midnight Express, Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton. Their contracts were not renewed by the NWA. Whether this means that they were fired, whether they won't be appearing with the NWA, remains to be seen. The Dynamic Dudes was another team I heard reports on. Tommy Rich was another whose contract was not renewed. The great Muta resigned. This happened after the Clash. I know he met with the NWA offices this week. We're trying to get confirmation during the show whether Muta is going to be back with the organization or not, but it doesn't look that way. It looks like Muta is now gone. Dr. Death Steve Williams, who we're trying to get on the phone as well, he resigned as well. He's not going to be with the NWA anymore. So the shakeups in that organization continue, and what we were talking about before the show, it's like once you watch them when they're on television, they put out a good product, but all the internal squabblings and all the controversy that's taking place behind the scenes, it's crazy. It's crazy to try to follow this organization.
It gets harder and harder. You practically need, like they say, you need a scorecard to keep up with it because people are coming and going at a rapid rate. I think the most interesting thing about the scenario you just spoke about was that how this affects the relationship between Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express.
Exactly. Now, Jim has been with them for several years. Jim built his career around them.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like we were mentioning before, they're two-time world champions, once with Dennis Condrey and the other time with the Lane and Eaton combination, and they're the only team to ever hold the U.S. and World Tag Team title concurrently at the same time.
Right.
So they've had a great deal of success. I'm a little surprised at the fact that they don't figure more prominently into the NWA's plans. I think everybody, out of all the wrestlers that you mentioned, I think the Midnight Express were the most surprising.
That was a shock because I know how popular and how effective they've been in the ring. They're one of the best tag teams in wrestling, and for them not to get their contracts renewed, it says something about the cutbacks that are taking place within this organization now.
Well, there you hear it, February 18th, 1990. That's John Arezzi speaking with Bob Smith from Pro Wrestling Illustrated. What was going on behind the scenes contractually with the Midnight Express, and what do you remember about this period of time where, again, originally Wrestle War was going to be Luger versus Dr. Death. Dr. Death leaves. We've talked about Muta leaving. Tommy Rich, they said not renewed. The Dynamic Dudes, I mean, no one's going to miss them.
Right. I think, did you say February 89? Because.
Oh, I meant February 1990. Excuse me if I said
yes. Well, yeah, I think you said 89, just to not confuse people, because obviously Doc would have been around the rest of 89, et cetera. So once I got on that bandwagon, I might have cussed John Arezzi if I'd heard his program at the time for this, because once again, it wasn't about us being fired. It was that we intended to leave. In February 89, it was George Scott, basically. The reason why that we left and took time off. We said, we're going to leave rather than have this guy beat us into powder. And so we planned, when our contract was up in April, we planned to leave and finish up. And we did that. That's why the promo I did aired on the Saturday night show, I believe, where I said that the Midnight Express have decided to go away, to take time off because Bobby's got injuries and we've been on a losing streak. And unless we can come back and be the best team in wrestling again, we're not going to come back at all. I cleared that with Jim Ross because I wanted to, we thought that we would leave and wait until George Scott in 89 and wait until George Scott got fired, which we assumed would happen, but didn't know how long it would take. Well, come to find out, they fired him before we even finished. We were supposed to finish on April 11th or whatever. They fired him after the Clash the week before. So I cleared that promo with Jim Ross to leave us a spot because they wanted us back at that point. And I said, no, we've already had some dates we booked with Bill Dundee and Continental, and also we were looking forward to a few months off, not have to think about this shit. So we will leave, but we'll come back in June. That's when I first got started dealing with Jim Herd. Because I had to renegotiate the contracts for me and the Midnight Express in 89. That was our first dealings with Herd. That's where he wanted us all from $225,000 a year each. He wanted to cut the Midnight to $75,000 a year each and give me $100,000. I said it wasn't a cut, it was an amputation. And so then began the long process where he couldn't figure out that I wasn't going to sign unless he gave the Midnights a deal they could live with. And we finally ended up, he would give me more money whenever he'd give them more money. And I'd say, I'm fine with my money, but they have to have $150, which was what they were giving the other top heels at the time. And finally, I got him to $125. He just wouldn't go any further. I said, all right, guys, they're guaranteeing us fucking six figures. He gave me $150, which was $50 more than I would have taken. So he was an idiot. But those contracts were going to expire in May of 1990. They had the 90-day, you had to give notice of if we wanted to get out, we had to give notice 90 days out. If they wanted to get out, they had to give us notice. So this is the same company, by the way, that had let the Iron Sheik's contract roll over for another year because they'd forgotten he was signed because they weren't using him, and they paid him $100,000 a year for 2 years and didn't use him for a year and a half. But immediately, Bobby Eaton and Stan Lanes and my termination came Federal Express the day before the time period was up because he didn't want to fucking give them the same amount of fucking money again that year. And again that year, we had decided we were going to fucking leave. So that was in February. Right after that, we got so basically the terminations meant that they weren't going to give us contracts at the same amount of money. It didn't mean that they weren't going to give us contracts at all. However, we didn't want any of their fucking contracts. Within a week of that happening, that's when Flair quit the booking committee, which I was still on. I'm still on the booking committee, but he gives me and my fucking team termination letters. So when Flair quit the booking committee, that's when I realized I'm fucking miserable. We gave it one more shot. We said he can get what he wants. He wanted to make me an announcer and have me quit managing, and he wanted to break up the Midnight Express. He wanted to make Bobby a heel and make Stan a single babyface, and he'd keep him around on the lower deals. But we said, well, to give everybody what he wants, including the fucking idiot, I'll become an announcer for the 150, and he would assign me on the spot again. Give the Midnight Express their same money deals, and we will switch them from the Midnight Express to the members of the Four Horsemen, because that's when Flair had started teasing that Woman was going to be their manager. And it was Flair and Arn. We had no Tully because of Herd. And Ole didn't want to be involved anymore because he'd been retired 18 times. They wouldn't leave him alone. So to have Four Horsemen, I sold Flair and sold Jim Ross, and then Herd agreed to it, on the idea of Bobby and Stan becoming part of the Horsemen under Woman. Flair loved that. It'd be the best working version of the Four Horsemen. The boys would get their money. We wouldn't lose more talent off this fucking show, and I could be an announcer until at that point we were wondering how long is it going to be till they fire Herd and to get smart. So maybe we can outlast him. And that was all agreed on. And then I went on vacation for the second time ever since I'd been in the wrestling business to Hawaii. Not it's the second time I'd been to Hawaii, but second time I'd had a vacation also. And come back 10 days later, and Herd has nixed the deal, and the Midnight aren't going to be part of the Horsemen, and he's back to wanting to not sign them as a team and want to split them up and blah, blah, blah. I don't know why he changed his mind. I don't care. Jim Ross tells me we were in Canton, Ohio, I think, at the Canton Civic Center. And there was scheduled to be a meeting of the booking committee the following day at some airport location on our way to our next show. As Herd would do, he would fly once a week somewhere where we were on the road and get a fucking conference room at an airport hotel so that he could piss us all off and nothing would get done. And then we'd have to rush to the town. And JR said, well, plead your case tomorrow at the booking meeting. I said, no, I ain't going to be at the booking meeting tomorrow. Because if I was, I wouldn't be pleading my case. I would bury my fucking 2 fingers here, 2 knuckles deep in Jim Herd's eye sockets. You can tell him I'm off the fucking booking committee, and come fucking the end of April, or whenever it was, beginning of May, we will be out of his fucking company. Fuck him and fuck WCW. So then I went and told the boys we'd been lied to again. And okay, fuck it, we're done. We're gone. And at that point, a weight was lifted off our shoulders because we realized that whatever the fuck we were going to be doing, we wouldn't have to be doing this for this fucking asshole anymore. And this happens for we subsist with this idea for another month or so until I remember plain as day again. Our contracts are almost up. It's toward the end of April, beginning of May of 1990. We're almost free. And we walk into the Norfolk Scope in Norfolk, Virginia one night, and Wahoo McDaniel was one of the agents. And the creative team at that time was Jim Ross, and I think maybe Terry Funk was still on it, and Ole was around somewhere, and Jody Hamilton was involved. And as I said, Wahoo was an agent. I think there were a few other agents. The point is, Wahoo greets me and Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane with, hey, they had a big meeting at the office today, and we all were there. And every single one of us, everybody on the creative team and all the agents overruled Herd and demanded that he re-sign you, so he's going to give you new contracts. And I was, motherfucker. And I grabbed my bag and I threw it down over at the fucking lockers and kicked some shit. And Stan was like, fucking, he just takes his strap of his bag off his shoulder and sets it down. And of course, Bobby just walked on over to the other side of the room and sat down like he normally did. And I'm like, God damn. He said, what the fuck? You should have seen Wahoo's face. He had the fucking Fred Flintstone face when the great kazoo appears. He said, I've never had that reaction to guys getting 6-figure contracts for. I said, Wahoo, we were looking forward to leaving. We don't want to be here anymore. We hate this fucking guy. But now we can't turn it down. They're offering us several $100,000 between the three of us. It's stupid to turn it down, so we'll take it. And that killed our attitude for a while. Not obviously out in the that's the problem. We were tearing the house down every night in the matches. We just hated everything else about it. And then that was the last contract that we signed with him, because that's the one we had a TV taping in Indianapolis. I'm going to say is the first part of May of 1990. And that's the next time that I saw Jim Herd in person, since I wasn't on the booking committee anymore. Wasn't having to see him once a week. We only saw him if he showed up at TV, which he wasn't at every single one of them, or even most of them, as I recall at that point. So the next time I saw him in person, we're in Indianapolis. We just walked in the building, and fucking Herd walks down the hall, and he's got a big manila envelope. And it was our contracts, because he walks right up to me and he hands me our new contracts and says these words, "You know I was against this." And I said, we were too. And I took them and fucking we signed them and handed them back to him. And that was May, and finally Stan and I left on October 30th. So we put up with that much more of it.
So they were 6-month contracts.
No. It was a year contract. We just said, fuck it on October 30th and left and went home. We still had 6 months left. Well, what is that? June, July, August, September, October. Yeah, about 6 or 7 months.
They didn't try to fuck with you
fuck it.
over that?
I had a couple of different phone calls with Herd. And the first one, I was here in Louisville, downstairs in the front bedroom, as a matter of fact. Visiting home and talked to Herd on the phone, and he said, well, I'm not just going to let you walk right into the WWF. And I said, Jim, I just left a company that's turned wrestling into a bunch of fucking cartoon bullshit. I'm not going to go to another one. I got other things I want to do. I ain't going to the WWF. So if you want to, you can send me a release specifically saying that this is a release for everything else but the WWF, and I'll sign it. Or you can not send me a release, and I'm going to do what the fuck I want to do anyway, and you can sue me and go through all that bullshit. Which what I wanted to do at that time was, I was going to make some shots in Memphis, and I was going to start setting up Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I figured he'd be long fired before we ever got Smoky Mountain off the ground anyway. And he said, I'll send you something. And then he sent me a release, and it didn't mention anything about any exceptions or can't go to the WWF. I could do anything I fucking wanted. And I signed it and sent it back to him. But I mean, they had contacted us. They were afraid. See, if it had been Heyman, he would have sued him. Because technically, since Ole said, well, at that Atlanta TV, if you don't like it, then just fucking go home, or whatever, however he phrased it. He was the booker at that time. That could have been construed as an instruction. So they would send us letters. Well, if you don't make these scheduled dates and such and such and such and such and such and such, you'll be considered in breach of your contract. I still have the letter, never responded to it. And we didn't make the fucking dates because we didn't intend to. And we intended to be in breach of our contract because we weren't going to work for those people anymore. And that's when he started trying to get me on the phone, because they still figured where they're going to do something. They couldn't realize that I just didn't want. Stan had the paternity suit and he was just tired of the business. But I specifically was going to be in the wrestling business, which is why I wanted to get away from WCW. And I was never intended to sue him. And I was never intended to fucking get a big deal to go back. That was which Heyman would call me once a month. You got them right where you want them. You can get anything you want out of them. When do you want to, like, when are you coming back is what he wanted to know, so that he could be prepared to how to fucking protect his position. And I would say, Paul, I'm not coming back. And I don't give a shit what I can get out of him. I don't want anything out of him. He couldn't believe it. Then he found out it was true. because I didn't go back.
Couple questions here. So this episode of Pro Wrestling Spotlight, February 18th, 1990, when would you have received the termination letters, and when did you actually pitch the idea of the Express and the Horsemen?
Well, we would have got the letters the previous week.
By the way, 2 weeks before that Wrestle War match with you guys in the Rock and Roll Express, which is a great match.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. And that's another reason why, because they were treating the Rock and Roll like that, too. That's why we went out and had the best match on the show. Fuck you. Find somebody else can do this. But, you know, they were right, because that's the one thing. Herd had more leaks than a goddamn fucking soup strainer. I mean, everything that happened in that office would come right out, as we've seen from John Arezzi's show and as we've seen from Steve Beverly and et cetera, et cetera. And then, so your question was when we would have got the notice was the week before that program, if even a week. And because I think the deals were up 90 days later.
And then the Horseman pitch.
And the Horseman pitch came after Flair quit the fucking booking committee, and I was tired of fucking dealing with this fucking moron Jim Herd. And, you know, that's why I said, okay, let's try one time to give him what he wants. He wants to break up me and the Midnight Express. He wants me to be an announcer, not a manager. But the Midnight Express, he wasn't even trying to cut my money. He just didn't want me to manage the Midnight Express. He wanted me to be an announcer. I didn't want to just do that. But I didn't want the boys to get their money cut or eliminated. So we said, all right, here's something palatable. He can't beat them to death and make them look like idiots if they're in the Four Horsemen. We need horsemen for the good of the company and for the fucking gate. This would be the best working group. Everybody would get along and like each other. They off that fucking heel stable alone, you have something for all the baby faces to do. And it doesn't mean that me and the Midnight Express break up publicly in front of all the fans. I sell them to Woman, and then I'm in the booth talking about them, how great they are. So because we knew that we were going to do something else together, or thought we would at that time. We didn't know Bobby ended up staying the next 13 years. So we didn't want the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette to break up on Atlanta television. That would never have happened. We would have never fought each other or broken up as public friends. So that was an idea that I had to give everybody what they wanted. I would be the announcer. I'd get my contract. The boys would be in the Horsemen. They'd get their contract and not be made to look like fucking underneath talent or idiots. We would be apart from each other, but not broken up in the public's eye, and the cards would benefit from it, and probably business at that point because of new matchups that we could do with these new baby faces. And that's why Flair liked it. That's why Kevin liked it. That's why JR liked it. That's why everybody except Jim Herd liked it.
A couple more quick questions on this. I'm fascinated by all this. So the plan was a new Midnight Express, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Bobby, and Stan. Would have made sense. Also, I mean,
a new Four Horsemen.
New Four Horsemen, because Bobby and Arn were best friends, weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, it would have made sense in a lot of different ways.
Which, and also is what we had just gone through that fucking program a year and a half beforehand talking about when the Midnight worked with Tully and Arn, talking about how Arn and Bobby had been best friends and the kids played together and etc.
Now, Woman was going to be the manager. How much longer did she last in the company after Kevin left the booking committee?
I can't remember. I don't remember.
I feel like she kind of disappeared pretty quickly into 1990.
Well, yeah, she did also. What was there for her to fucking do? Flair quit the book and was trying, by the end of the year, was trying to leave, period. I remember, well, I take that back. It was early 91. No, it was still.
I was about to ask you about early 91, because early 91 is when Dusty came back as the booker, and didn't he right away approach you? Or not, I don't know if right away, but pretty quickly upon returning to WCW as the booker.
Yes, he did, and remind me to come back to that. But I was just going to say that I can't remember when it was I wrote the first draft of Flair's first resignation letter. But the one that he finally sent to Jim Herd resigning as a wrestler, I wrote.
Now, wait a minute. Resigning as a wrestler, would that have been after you left the company?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes, because every time he wanted to write a real good letter, he'd call me and say, Cornette, write me a fucking letter. Or it's some type of colonel, because he called the Kentucky colonel. That's what the joke was. He called me one day in Charlotte when he was already working for Vince in New York, and he said, "You got to come up here and manage me. We could call you the Kentucky colonel. You could dress like Colonel Sanders." Good Lord, And I was setting up Smoky Mountain. I was trying to get Rick for Smoky Mountain before he went to fucking Vince. Ruben said, offer him fucking 10 grand a shot for fucking 12 shots a year, just once a month. But anyway, but he would have me write a letter. And there was one time I wrote a resignation letter and he decided not to fucking send it. And then the second time he sent it to fucking Herd. But anyway, I can't remember exactly when the first one was, but it was just that whole fucking year. Everybody was just miserable around that fucking guy.
You and Stan both leave after Halloween Havoc, and then Dusty returns in the beginning of 1991.
Yes.
And Jim Herd's still there, so
yes,
it was a non-starter.
So Dusty calls me in Charlotte, and he said, "Well, come down and talk to me. Come down and talk to me, kid." And so I went down to CNN Center because I wasn't going to disrespect Dusty by not talking to him. I didn't want to come back. I didn't know how I was going to tell Dusty I wasn't coming back. I didn't want to tell Dusty about Smoky Mountain Wrestling because nobody knew that it was a thing that could be started at that point. I wanted to keep it that way. So I said, all right. So I went down to CNN Center, went to the office, sat down, talked to Dusty. He wanted me to come back as an announcer. He said that it's possible that, we might want you, to manage somebody later on, but just come, it'll be easy. Just come back as an announcer at your old money. Everything, I said, what about the midnight? Well, right then I knew, Dusty didn't have complete control of everything, or he would have said, we're going to put the Midnight Express back together. You're going to manage them. I'm going to do this and do that. But it wasn't even about that. I went down trying to figure out a way to get out of it. He was just giving me some because I wasn't going to take it anyway, because I'd already started making plans and talked to Rick Rubin and et cetera, et cetera. And basically, and I told him, I said, Dusty, Jim Herd is still here and I don't want to have anything to do with him. He said, you'll never see him. You just deal with me. You're never going to see Jim Herd. He's never going to be around you. Because I guess at that point he wasn't going to a lot of the TVs anyway. Because what could he do? He couldn't help, and all the boys hated him. So what I did was I told Dusty. I said, "Well, I tell you what," because that's when Joe Pedicino. We talked about Joe here a couple weeks ago when he passed away. Joe had already called me, and I'd already gone and done a couple of tapings for the LPWA out in Nevada. The ladies professional wrestling. It was once a month, and it was something for me to do to make a little money while I was doing this other shit, because I wasn't really making any other shots or doing anything else. And I said, they've been so good to me and I've committed to them. I'll come back here and do that and do the announcing if you'll let me also, if it's written in that I can also announce for them. Because I knew that he couldn't get that done and that Herd wouldn't go for it. I said, these people have been real good to me. He called them the LPGA. Dusty did. I said, I can't stand them up. And I just, blah, blah, blah. And he said, okay. And so I got out gracefully and drove back to Charlotte. And he knew I didn't want to come, so he didn't chase me anymore. And of course, they couldn't get that deal written in with Turner Broadcasting that I could also do the ladies group on my own and their pay-per-views and et cetera. And, and then the next time that I saw Dusty was when we actually did go back for Watts in 93. And of course that lasted for a few weeks, and then they screwed Watts around and Dusty took over at that point for Watts. So Dusty was technically the booker at the Super Brawl pay-per-view in 93 when we had the match with the Heavenly Bodies and the Rock and Roll. Because who was it? Oh, God damn it. It was somebody that had worked for Crockett that I knew. And when we came in, we had done a Smoky Mountain show that afternoon in Johnson City at Freedom Hall, and then drove an hour down to Asheville, North Carolina. And so we came in a little late. So as we're coming in, one of the guys says, "Oh, it's good to see you, back, Jim, after all this time," or whatever. And of course, I just got out of the car and I'm a little fucking rushed anyway, and I already knew this was going to be our last day because Watts was gone. And the only reason that we were fulfilling that date was because Watts had put our deal in writing so they couldn't screw us. So that's why we were there. So when he said, good to see you back, I said, well, as Dennis Connery used to say, don't pull up no chairs, we can't stay. This will be the last time you see us. So, but not mad or anything. But then one of the referees, I think it was Nick Patrick, came and said, Dusty wants to see you. And so I go in Dusty's office. He said, kid, have we got a problem? I said, no, Dusty, why would you think that? He said, well, I just heard somebody say you weren't going to be back. I said, it's not like I'm mad, but we're not going to be back, Dusty. Because it's not because of you. I made the deal with Watts. The first angle we did, they altered, but didn't tell Watts, told him bullshit when they edited the audio and took some shit out of it. He didn't have full control. They tried to bullshit him. They bullshitted me. That's the same day that I confronted Bischoff because a little bird had told me that he was one of the people that edited the angle. I said, the point is we got our deal in writing and we're here to fulfill it, but we're not coming back because Watts told me he had full control and he didn't. And I'd work for you, as you know, any day of the week if you had full control, but you don't. So as long as this is still owned by Turner Broadcasting, and especially if Jim Hurd's still around, well, no, Hurd was gone by then. But I said, as long as he was gone, I said, especially, well, the previous time I told Dusty, especially when Jim Hurd's around, I said, now Hurd's gone, but you still don't have full control. Nothing, as long as Turner Broadcasting is involved, this is going to be what this is. So that's why we're not coming back, not because of you. If they ever do give you what they promise people, I said, let me know, because I'm sure we can work together. But that never happened. So, but anyway, that was the two times with Dusty. So we left in 90, he called me back in 91. I got out of it gracefully. And then Watts called in the latter part of 92. And I thought that they had finally given somebody that knew what the fuck he was doing full control, and we started, and he didn't have full control, and so we left, and we never went back.
Watts didn't call you at all before that point in 1992?
No, but I mean, that was the last thing he was thinking of when he goes into that fucking fiasco where, what was it? What is he called? Kip Fry, Francis Ford Coppola. He was producing movies. He had given guys deals where that they got paid guaranteed salary, whether they worked or not. And if they showed up to pay-per-view and did their job, they got bonuses. And the company was lost like $8 or $10 million a year. And everything was in turmoil. So when he first got in there, he was trying to work with that. When he first called me, was asking about Paul Orndorff. He said, I see Paul's working for you. I said, yeah. He said, how's he looking now? I said, he looks great. He had problems with the arm, but he's back in shape now. He's having great matches. And that's when Watts gave me the old, well, I'd like to use him some, but I don't want to take him away from you. The old fucking, Vince Sr. thing. Well, I'd like Waldo Von Erich to start, but I can give you a week on Andre. So at first I said, sure, absolutely. Let me know when I need to finish Paul up and blah, blah, blah. And then as more we started talking, he said, well, I've got some guys I either need to repackage or need to let go for 60 days to bring them back new. Or also, he asked about Brian Clark, Night Stalker, Adam Baum. That's a good kid I might want to do something with, which he did. So we started working together. And as I've said on the program before, and hopefully you can find it on YouTube, that would have been the early version and a different version of developmental with Smoky Mountain Wrestling and WCW if Watts had stayed. I didn't trust anybody to deal with anybody else but him. Didn't trust anybody else's word or anybody else that had the power.
He could have sent Eric Watts to Smoky Mountain.
That would have come up and I could have got something out of Eric.
Yeah, I think so too.
I wouldn't have made him the champion, but I could have got something out of him. But anyway, so where were we going with all of that?
I'm going to finish my plugs. It was a little
okay.
Little bit of a road.
There was a hiatus there, a bump in the road.
I do love the idea of you returning in 91 as a commentator for the debut of Oz and Big Josh
Oh, good
Arachnaman, all the greatness of WCW in 1991. But hear the original broadcast of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight from February 18th, 1990, patreon.com/Arezzi, or hear us review it at pwspod.com. It's available wherever you find your favorite podcast. And the 605 Super Podcast, the Mothership! A little bit of a delayed fart there this week.
Well, I tried.
New episode, hopefully up within the next few days. Hopefully it'll be up by Monday, finishing it up right now. We are adding about an hour of outtakes from Kentucky Fried Wrestling of me and Scott Bowden. Scott used to write the scripts for the opening of the show. I told him I wanted to do it because I loved his writing. And it went from us just talking about Memphis wrestling history to this like bickering that he would write that was hysterical, and it was really hard to get through, like moments of this show have been. But hear that?
Yes.
Plus Jeff Otto
if you think it's hard doing this show, imagine how hard it must be to listen to it.
That's right.
Plus Jeff Otto.
Jeff Otto on Ringmasters, Great American Bash 85 on videotape. Scott Teal and Greg Oliver on Soul Man, the Rocky Johnson book. Al Getz, classic Hawaii audio, and much, much more. 605pod.com, available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast. The Mothership!
Oh, good God. Got way too much energy. All right, before we talk, you made me do it again. And I'm going to say, before we talk about the modern wrestling, the All Elite Wrestling program from this past week, which if I hadn't seen 2 segments of it, I would have liked the fucking thing. They actually did a lot of good stuff, so I'm not going to just completely tear the piss out of it this week, but a couple of things I want to clear up. I guess they did something on the Road Warrior Buck and his balding brother did something on their little YouTube show they do with their friends that has teased and foretold the coming of the former revival. They gave some kind of cue or hint or something, didn't they?
They did. I didn't watch it because, unlike a lot of fans of the modern stuff, I think that show they do on YouTube is one of the worst pieces of garbage I've ever seen. There's nothing worse than wrestlers who think they can do comedy and they can't, and it's just weird, lame wrestling humor that doesn't work. That show is garbage. But apparently, at the very end of it,
I didn't ask you to give a whole review now, and everybody that listens to this already knew that's what you were going to say because that's a fair assessment of the program. But I just asked you about a tease for our friends, the Revival.
What I meant to say is, by the way, that show, pure garbage. But at the very end, apparently in the clouds, they saw FTR in the clouds, signifying the impending...
Are you sure somebody wasn't trying to deliver them some flowers? Oh, that's FTD. I forgot. Well, anyway... Stop it now. Whether they're going to be the Revival or the Revolt or whatever, we lie, and I can't remember what their new names are. And goddamn, now
it's the Revolt. And by the way, right there is the program: the Revolt versus the Revolting on AEW.
Well, I see what you did there. The point is, I like these guys, and I can't even remember what to call them anymore because now they've changed their Christian names. Plus, I knew Dawson when he had his previous name, which I don't even know whether he even admits to anymore or not. But I've known him under a variety of assumed names. But the point is, every time that something like that is teased, then it starts on Twitter, and I get emails, and everybody, are you going to manage the Revival? Is it? And even Uncle Dave chipped in this past week on his, I guess in his newsletter, he said, unless Cornette has been perpetrating a work of biblical proportions, he's not going to AEW. And for once, Dave's right on the nose on that. But everybody, and I wanted to try to explain, it's not, even if in a perfect world, ladies and gentlemen, if competent, adult, serious professionals were the executive vice presidents of All Elite Wrestling instead of Kenny Olivier and the Road Warrior Bucks, I would still not be the manager of the Revival in All Elite Wrestling on a full-time basis. And that's never been something that was going to happen. I've said on the program a couple weeks ago, I would love to manage the Revival on an independent show. Once there are such a thing again, it would have to be of some level of professionalism with a halfway decent crowd, something like a WrestleCade or something where, those guys have a big building and draw a great crowd. or somewhat, Bobby Fulton's new building. I haven't seen it yet, but if it's new, it's better than the old one up there. But somewhere where there's going to be a legitimate crowd and a legitimate facility, I think they'd like it if I managed them. I think I'd like it if I managed them against a decent quality tag team. That would be fun to do that once. It was never going to be a situation where even if people that I was in love with, even if Bobby Fulton inherited $1 billion and opened All Elite Wrestling, I was never going to be the manager of the Revival on a weekly television basis ever, because that would require me being on the road on a weekly basis. You saw where they were doing television. One week they were booked in Newark. One week they were in Salt Lake City, for fuck's sake. I've been on an airplane twice in my life in the last 20 fucking years. Both times was to go to England for a variety of reasons. One was a large sum of money, and one of the bigger one was that my wife the first time had never been there before and wanted to go badly, and the second time had new friends and wanted to go back. Stacy has never been to Salt Lake City. I don't think she ever wants to fucking go. So I've said this in the past on the show. There's a bunch of new listeners. Yes, at one point in time, when I heard that this All Elite Wrestling was going to be a thing, after I talked to Tony Khan, I was not optimistic, as I've said, because of who he was going to be in business with. But there still would have been a time where I would have said, okay, for a pay-per-view, I'll do 2 or 3 weeks of television. If I have, for a large sum of money, if I have to, I can drive to Salt Lake City. Flying still would have been an option to build up to a pay-per-view just to piss those fans off, because that would have been a pop. And it helped get the Revival over and establishing a new company. Yes, I would have been open to that. Had the All Elite Wrestling Brain Trust proved me wrong about my original assumptions, which they didn't. Because from the very first pay-per-view and the Battle Royal with the Freak Show and the vaudeville shit and the fucking guy with the hands in the pockets and the fucking small children and the people painted different colors and the fucking cat that chased the rat that ate the whatever the fuck. That closed that, and just the intrepid insipidness of Kenny Olivier and that smarmy, slappable face and all the gesticulating and finger pointing and all the other just goofy, unnecessary, independent outlaw mud show shit that they have done, and the fact that there are legitimate professional wrestlers out there who could get over and help a startup company on national television, and instead a bunch of high school buddies are out there playing wrestler. That's what closed that window for me. I have no interest whatsoever in being a part of it. So for everybody that always sends the tweets and emails, I love the Revival, no matter what name they're under. Those guys not only were wrestling fans, but they had the eye to see what the shit was supposed to be like and the dedication to train themselves to do it. And every time I have seen them, I haven't followed them weekly for the past 5 years, but every time I have seen them, they have had a great match and they have excelled at something that very few people can do well anymore at all. So, and I do agree that probably a manager would help them out, because if there is any weak point in their game, it may be the promo aspect. And I would love to have managed them in the old days when I was younger, if we were either in a territory where we could drive, or I still had the love of the wrestling business to put up with getting on planes, or whatever the case. But I'm not younger. I ain't going to fly. And as everybody knows that listens to this program, I would be insane to give up. That's another thing. When everybody says, well, the so-and-so ought to bring you in. I even get still messages on my voicemail from people calling up saying, well, I'm running a show in such and such, and I want to bring you in. That's an old wrestling term, bring you in, book you, give you a job. I would be insane, as everyone knows, if I turned down and or stopped doing all the things I've been doing the last several years to just jump into a full-time wrestling job for somebody else again. So love the Revival, would love to manage them on a professionally run show against a nice team for the sake of the experience of doing it. I would have loved at one time to have done a limited number of a few appearances for a pay-per-view or some respect to help kick them off. But now I would be embarrassed to be involved in the dog and pony show that they apparently are going to. Some people have said, well, they ought to go to the NWA. They'd be a better fit there. I hardly think the NWA is going to outbid Tony Khan. I think I was the highest paid guy on the NWA roster except for Nick Aldis. And if I was the Revival, I wouldn't do that for the money they were paying me. So there you go. So this is, unfortunately, just because of timing and landscape, never been a thing that was going to happen regularly. So please, everybody, calm down and support the Revolt, manager or no, if they go to All Elite Wrestling and just full on football kick the young fucks straighten the balls and just take their fucking belts and walk off. That's what I think should happen.
Well, I think as we talked about the other day, we don't have to worry about you managing them because I'm going to manage them. I'm going to manage the Revolt.
I don't believe that.
Swerve, let me ask you.
Swerve, yeah.
When you look at everyone who's out there right now, are there guys you look at and say, I wish I could manage them? I wish I had a chance to work with them. What guys would you actually want to manage besides the Revolt out there right now, all the wrestlers you've seen lately?
Well, and now, of course, this is going to piss somebody off if I don't mention them because they're going to be, I thought we were friends. But just off the top of my head, and once again, if things were, I'm not going to manage anybody now. I think I've made that plainly clear. Just can you imagine me just even 2 nights a week being in a fucking hotel now, but every week for months on end? Being in a fucking hotel room and going to a different city.
It's tough enough to get you into a suit now.
You know, I haven't worn a fucking tie since, when was it? Was it December?
I was going to say November.
I think, I did not do some in December? I'm not sure. Anyway, nevertheless, I did put a collared shirt on for that WWE shoot for the fucking Ruthless Aggression series. Anyway, so yes, point is, but if I was younger, if travel was easier, if flying wasn't miserable and the whole world hadn't changed, I'd pick the easy answer and say MJF, but he doesn't need me. I just like to work with him, just fucking be up close at the ring and on promos just to watch him. But, but yes, in a heartbeat, he's a great talent, but he wouldn't need me. I think the one of people that I've interacted with personally, rather than just seen on television, but people I've interacted with personally over the last year, Jacob Fatu. And I've said this before, I'm not advocating that they should have just raided Court Bauer's fucking talent closet, but the fact that Jacob Fatu is signed to MLW, but a billionaire is running AEW on national television, and they've got pockets and the fucking little kid stunt. Right there is financial irregularity on somebody's part and fucking sabotage. Jacob Fatu is a beast, and nobody that I've seen in a long time gets over live like this guy. I was there the night they brought him to Chicago, and the people hadn't seen him. And he went out and he did his shit, and he got over. And it wasn't just because the moves he was doing. His shit looks good and convincing, but it's safe. He's got timing. He's got ring positioning. He's got facials. He looks like a badass because he is a badass. and then when he's like, when I saw Snuka for the first time live in 1979, and it was just obvious that this guy was a fucking freak of nature, that a guy that size that looked like that shouldn't be that agile or that limber or that coordinated to be able to fucking move around like that, but still fucking be that big and hit that hard. He was a beast. It's the same fucking thing. Of course, they've put him over like a monster from the start, but that's the way you push a guy like this. And if it was a guy that couldn't carry the ball, it wouldn't have worked. And that's the kind of guy you take into, whether it's the WWE, a big fucking promotion, and you've got big stars that you can match this guy with on pay-per-view to make money, or down the network, or whether it's All Elite Wrestling. You fucking introduce this guy with a manager, and you fucking smash him over, and you give him a backstory that people can believe, where, as Jerry Jarrett used to say, you tell them what they know to be the truth. In this instance, in this instance, in this instance. So when you get to the working part, there's still, well, everything else he said is true and we can see it. So where you blur that line. If I was going to give him a backstory, it would be he is a member of the Samoan family, right? So you would introduce this guy. He doesn't say a word. He looks like that. He fucking destroys anybody that gets in his way. And I would be cutting the promo. I'd be saying, yes, he is a member of the exalted royal Samoan family. The family that's supposed to always have each other's back and take care of each other. But the reason why you haven't seen this guy on television, the reason why he hasn't taken his place with the rest of the Hall of Fame members and the rest of the champions, it's not because of any shortcoming on his part. It was because he was the black sheep. They said he made the wrong choices on who to hang around with, but you know what? The actual fact was he made those choices on who to hang around with because his family turned their backs on him. His family were jealous of his talent and the success he would have. So they didn't have his back. And those things he did were to prove his loyalty to the people that had proved their loyalty to him, not the family. His new friends. He had to do those things to prove his loyalty. So while all the rest of the royal Samoan family of wrestling were putting that pig in the ground and having all those celebrations and talking about all the championship dynasties and reigns, Jacob Fatu was looking out a window with bars on it, not a part of the fucking celebration, not a part of the family, itching to get outside where he could breathe air again. Because what happens when you cage up a beast? You make that beast turn and want to fight. Well, thanks to me, the beast got out. The beast has another chance. The beast can be released now in the world of wrestling where he should have been rightfully all along because of my connections. And now he's glad he's free again. And he's loyal, not like his family, not like the people that turned their back on him. He's loyal. He doesn't have any grudges against anybody here, but I do. And see, since Jacob Fatu is loyal, my grudges become his grudges. And that way you've set this guy up without telling everybody all the fucking details. He's a member of the Samoan family, but he's been shunned by him. He's obviously been in jail for association. And then you flesh out without the manager explaining it about things that are fucking found out, etc. That, yeah, he has spent some time in jail. He was a member of a gang. He did some things he had to prove his loyalty, or elsewise he might have got fucking offed. And now this fucking beast has one more chance to be released on wrestling, thanks to Jim Cornette and possibly Stephen P. New, his attorney, who got him fucking sprung. And anything that the manager says, the beast will perform. And then you put your baby faces one by one, try to slay this fucking dragon, and he goes through every single one of them until he gets to the guy that you have chosen to be your ultimate fucking face. And that's the one. You may have chinks in the beast's armor from time to time. You can find out maybe he has one weakness if it's the right guy that fucking does something, but you smash him over, everybody on the roster, until he gets to the guy. And then the guy shows vulnerability. And then you do an angle. And the guy gets hurt. And the guy comes back to get even. And the guy does get even and slays the dragon. Depending on the size of the company, you got 6 months to a year and a half of fucking business with this fucking guy that can get over. Or
that's pretty good.
You have a guy with his hands in his pockets and he fucking jumps around. And then to be honest, also, if you're wanting, now's the time, Jacob Fatu, now's the time for Brock Lesnar to do a quick job. That would have woke some people up. Not in an empty building. Can you imagine Jacob Fatu coming out Because once again, this is one of those deals. Could Brock out wrestle Jacob Fatu and tie him up into fucking knots? Yes, he certainly could. If Jacob Fatu was allowed to fucking eat eyeballs and fucking rip out fucking testicles, Jacob Fatu could hang right in there with fucking Brock Lesnar. If Brock Lesnar did a quick job in front of a stadium full of people for Jacob Fatu's fucking springboard moonsault after he'd done all of his monster shit, you'd make a fucking star. If Goldberg did a quick job for fucking Jacob Fatu's fucking springboard moonsault and they carried him out selling his fucking ribs, you'd make a new star.
You know, he is one of those guys that you look at the AEW roster and you're like, how is this guy not there? You know, you're supposed to have the best of what's not in WWE. How is he not there?
Well, apparently he didn't go to school with the Young Bucks because he's from California too.
I was going to say he's probably part of the wrong clique in California. That's really what it comes down to, who gets into AEW and who doesn't.
But anyway, I've got a few other ideas.
Oh.
For different people. Jacob Fatu would be one if you wanted to go the other way. You don't want a monster. You don't want a beast. You want a guy that can do some of his own talking, a completely different flavor. You want a guy that can be a major star on his own, but you want to give him a manager to help him get to that point, and then later on he can blossom. Alexander Hammerstone.
Now, he's a talent. I agree with you.
Not only that, but he's coachable. You tell him to tweak something in his interviews, and he instantly does it. And then he does it from then on without you telling him. If you see something in his match and you say, why did you do that? Or could you do this instead? Or what the fuck? He sees it and he corrects it. He's got all the tools. He's got the size. He's got the physique. He's got the look. He looks like a star. He can talk. He can talk on his own. He doesn't need a manager. But Bobby Heenan managed Kurt Hennig. Sometimes you can still have a great fucking pairing. And with him, the backstory is completely different. With him, the backstory, instead of being a fucking savage, a fucking former prisoner, a goddamn guy that was in gangs, he's wealthy. He's had the best training. He's had the best advantages. He's always been he's the high school and college football team fucking quarterback. He got all the pussy. He's so much better than everybody else in every way that he's condescending and looks down on everybody. That's the kind of guy that he can be a bully on offense, and then you can find out when he gets on defense with a top guy, he's got a chicken shit side. He's so seldom in his life been pressed that when he can't fucking handle it and he cracks up. But you promote him with not just the $1 million man gimmick. It's not about the wealth, but just about the advantages. And he's more like, well, you know, a gimmick that I always loved and that I wish something could have been done with in wrestling was Alexander Karelin, the Experiment. Karelin was the fucking Russian Soviet fucking athlete that dominated amateur wrestling for however many years. He went undefeated, blah, blah, blah. Because, you know, he was an experiment. They literally kind of gave the impression they had built this motherfucker in a lab. He was on probably the best cutting edge fucking growth hormone and everything else. But the Experiment, that's what Matt Morgan, I used him in the same vein. He's the one that actually came up with the word blueprint. But it fit because my thought with him was he was the perfect athlete. He had no flaws. He had a 4.0 grade average in fucking school, but he was 7 feet tall, but he could fucking leapfrog, but he could dunk a basketball, but he was a bodybuilder. And you do the training videos with a guy like that if you have a budget, like they did in Rocky IV, where the guy's fucking training in the goddamn lab and he's blowing the fucking charts off all the machines. Whether it be the Experiment or the Blueprint or the whatever, Chris Masters was the Masterpiece. That's that flavor of guy. And then you let his natural personality carry that fucking story, and it's believable and relatable. He's another single guy that I think that he could actually benefit from a manager, probably just somebody at ringside with a little more experience to fucking on-the-job training. And honestly, I've worked with them personally just once, but we've talked about them sometimes. They were the War Machine, but they're the Viking Warriors or Raiders or what the fuck is their name?
Now you got me confused. Viking Raiders, I think.
The Viking Raiders. Okay, just take all their clothes off. Just strip them completely naked and change the name and the clothing and the gimmick and the whole 9 yards. But those two guys, because of the human beings that they look like and the shit they can do, could be presented as not only an incredible heel team, but a heel team that people would start calling to turn face. And unlike a Jacob Fatu, you never want him to have a redeeming quality. You want him to be an evil, vicious hitman motherfucker to the core until he finally finds out the manager has fucked him and stabbed him in the back and was disloyal to him. And that's why he turns. And then he does all the same shit that he was doing to the fucking baby faces to the fucking heels, but he never still acknowledges the people. But with the Viking, whoever the fuck, find something. I don't know what the fuck. I haven't given a bunch of thought of this because I'm not getting paid for it. But I like those guys as talents. If you could find a look for them that meant something that was legitimate and realistic and credible. The flavor of that team is, I think, back to Don Fargo and his partners in the Hells Angels / Chain Gang. Whether it was, first was, Frank Dillinger. He's the one guy's leg shot off. And then he got a few more Dillingers. One of them was fucking Ron Dupree. One of them was Chris Colt. But they dressed as fucking dirty bikers. They rode motorcycles up to the back of the arena, walked in, went to the ring in the same shit they were wearing, had their fucking match, left, got on their motorcycles, and rode off. Don Fargo lived his gimmicks. Whether these guys are two fucking rednecks from the Ozarks somewhere, or fucking mountaineers from West Virginia, or fucking beer drinkers from fucking Milwaukee, or some goddamn gang people from fucking South Florida or whatever, they dress fucking badass. They live the gimmick 24/7. They come in the buildings. They do that shit. The promos, remember the Chain Gang promos, where Fargo would be talking louder, but the other guy'd they'd be having two conversations at the same time, and it was just chaos. You don't know what the fuck's the matter with these guys. And they're fucking drunk, and they're high, and they're whatever the fuck else they are. And with a manager to direct them and make them heels, you get a heel run out of them, but they could still do a little more entertaining shit that a Jacob Fatu would do, because they're not carrying the whole territory. They can make the kind of goofy faces, and they can be the bruiser and crusher, because pretty soon they're badass and they do all those cool moves and they hit hard and they're ass kickers. And at some point or another, the people are going to kind of start liking them. And then you fucking create tension with the manager or whatever the fuck. And then they become gimmick baby faces. And you get another run at it. It's just those guys, in all their matches, they deliver great shit. They need somebody with a vision of who they ought to be and how they ought to be pushed and how to best use their incredible big man maneuvers, and combine that with a fucking, just a decent look and not so much ha-ha, and putting them in there with teams half their size and half their potential. So that's another, just off the top of my head, from people I've seen over the last year that I've interacted with.
You know who I think you'd be good with? Jeff Cobb.
Well, I've heard so much good stuff about him. And he's another monster, and he's a shooter, he's legitimate, and he's built great, and you can tell he's a guy that's a power guy. And they brought him in and even kind of built him up at the start, like, oh my God, he's such this horrifying, scary, intimidating personality. And then he, went 20 minutes, got beat, was another one of the boys. If he went into another company with a slightly different look, or just these people have short memories and they could bring him back and do it right, that'd be great. But I couldn't understand why. That was the first time I'd seen him. I'd heard a lot about him and how badass he was, but they didn't present him that way. And part of that may be his fault. I'm not saying any of the creative was his, but sometimes you have to step up and take your opportunity to get over as a fucking badass on national TV. I'm not saying go into business for yourself and win the match, but I would have been more aggressive. But that was definitely a failure on the part of the fucking brain trust over there. Yeah, here he is. Well, there he went. You lose the first fucking time when you come in as supposed to be a badass and a hitman. I don't get it. Anyway, speaking of other things I don't get, should we talk about this show real quick?
Yeah.
No, I can't be too hard on it, so this might not be very long today. But for the most part, this show, this is All Elite Wrestling from what was Wednesday, the 27th or 28th?
The 29th.
29th. Well, even better. It's even more recent. Wednesday, the 29th. I've said I love the fucking atmosphere. I'll say the obligatory again. Yes, they have figured it out. This kind of the small building with some of the guys in the arena, kind of Fight Club atmosphere. They figured it out. You can do wrestling like this and it can be good. It isn't always, but it can be. But not that sterile, completely silent, clean. Bah. Anyway. The opening of the show, I loved the Cody and Darby package. I love their packages. And this was serious. And it was two guys with a reason to have this match and a reason to kind of be pissy with each other without, one guy ever having raped the other one's fucking pet dog or whatever. Darby's speaking style fits him. I love the corporate sheep thing and there's, Cody in the fucking suit and tie and there's Darby in the furthest thing, but that's relatable. Even though everybody loves Cody, all the fucking young skateboarding fucks will get behind Darby, as even some of us old middle-aged white fucks don't like people who wear ties. So they set it up and it's totally serious, but imagine that this is Cody involved in it again. And before you shit all over it, because it's Cody involved in it again, I'll just say I liked the way they built it, and I liked their match until the finish. Why don't you go ahead and unload first?
I thought it was good. I thought the package was really good. I don't shit on everything Cody does, just the stuff that isn't that great. I understand why Brandy comes to ringside with him, but she doesn't have to get physically involved in every single match with Cody. And I thought for me, that took me a little bit out of the match for a moment. But I thought it was a good match. And I also think if we're looking at long-term booking, well, I'll talk about the finish in a second. If we're looking at long-term booking, I think Darby has to beat Cody at some point in the next few months. Because this is now twice where... Well, I guess the first time I went to the time limit, and now Cody beat him, so it's kind of setting up Darby getting the win. But I didn't like the finish because neither guy had both shoulders down.
Well, here was the whole thing, and I'm with you on. Although when I wrote in my notes when they did the spot where Brandy got taken out, I wrote "Thank God." Okay, she's there. Even though both these guys are baby faces, she doesn't need to be at ringside because the baby face doesn't need a manager unless there's somebody else in the other guy's corner. But I understand she's there. But like you said, they had a nice wrestling match. They did good shit. But then they do the spot where Brandy gets taken out. And, oh, my God. Okay, well, if that's what happened, then that was great. Now she's out of the picture, and they're going it on their own. And it gives Cody a reason to start being a little bit of a heel on Darby Allin. So I was fine with that. They go to the break. They come back, and Cody's got heat going on Darby. As I said, he's got a reason to heel. Because Darby just accidentally charged into his wife. Chris Jericho's great. I'll say that again on fucking color. I think actually that what they ought to do if they're smart is when everything gets back to normal, put the regular commentary team back, but have a $2.99 a month service where you can listen to Jericho do the commentary.
He's great.
And people would pay.
Yeah, he's great on commentary with Shivani. Yeah.
But anyway, so Cody gets a heat on Darby, but he wasn't really healing. As I used to say to some of the guys, when we'd lay out matches, don't just automatically start gouging eyeballs and kicking dicks and flipping the fans off, but be rough and be mad and be, manhandle the guy. That kind of healing. It was good work. Darby Allin sells well. This match made sense for the most part. Darby starts making a comeback and starts working the leg. And here's one of the it's just always when they try to get a spot with a girl in. Britt Baker, as Cody rolls out of the ring and he's wandering around, he's trying to sell what's going on. Darby Allin grabs the referee and distracts. I think it was Aubrey, right? Grabs referee Aubrey and distracts her. And Britt Baker hits Cody in the head with her shoe at ringside. Why did Darby distract the referee? Why is Britt Baker helping Darby? We understand that Britt Baker is just a cunt and is a heel and don't like anybody and wants to stir shit up, so that's fine. But why would Darby help her in that? That's what didn't make any sense. They could have done it where Cody just rolled out and fucking leaned on the railing for a second and Britt got a cheap shot in, and Darby could have been looking over the fucking referee's shoulder and seen it and jumped out and grabbed Cody and go, don't do that to Britt and throw him back in. You got to keep people fucking consistent here. But now that was for Darby Allin to get a little bit heelish and get some heat on Cody so Cody could make a comeback. But once again, Darby's already in this match. He's already been taking punishment. He can get rough on a guy that's been rough on him without switching completely heel. Anyway, they go to another break. When they come back, now Cody's making a comeback. Here's the other thing. The weight belt. He makes his comeback. He takes the weight belt off. It's like Lawler's strap. He drops the strap. He makes the comeback. He takes the weight belt off. People are ready for a comeback. But then he didn't use it. He just gave it to Aubrey. And everybody said, well, of course, because if he'd done it in front of the referee, he would have been disqualified. Well, no shit. But at the same time, they just distracted the goddamn referee for a fucking shoe to the face, which is not even remotely germane to either of the people in this match. You can't distract the referee or come up with a reason why Aubrey would be distracted for the top babyface in the company to one time do his signature thing and whip a guy with the fucking belt. If you're not going to whip a guy, if you're not going to use it, don't take it off, because then it's a popcorn fart and it's a letdown. And once again, it's a signatory thing to start Cody's comeback. It has to be used once. And yes, it would be a disqualification, but distract the referee. There's all kinds of other things going on this program that don't make a lick of sense, but they're going to fucking die on this hill, as they say. Anyway, Cody's selling the leg big. And Darby Allin got a crossroads. 1-2. Kicked out. Darby got the figure 4. Brandy comes back out. She's selling in a phony way, and she looks like she's creeping and sneaking with a bottle of water. Dustin gets out of the figure 4, but she gives Dustin the water bottle, Cody, I'm sorry, the wrong brother, gives Cody the water bottle, which this looked awkward and what the fuck, and the whole spot is for Darby to snatch it away and hit him with it. But now she's back out there. Why? She's not a heel that needed to come back out and get involved in the finish, and she's not a baby face that needed to come back out and counter a heel in the finish. So there's no reason she needed to come back out, and I didn't get the fucking water.
A lot of baby faces get thirsty in the middle of their matches, and this is the first time I've seen them facilitated with a water bottle from the back in the middle of the match.
It's almost like she's going to show up looking through a window at some point just to make sure her face is on there. Anyway, so Cody hits the fucking crossroads 1-2, and Darby kicks out. Okay, this match has been good except for these set piece spots were a little forced in whatever case. But anyway, finally Cody does the coffin drop, which is Darby's finish. But he hits Darby's knees. Darby gets his knees up. Okay, great. Then Darby does the perfect coffin drop and hits Cody. And then Cody does the old deal, rolls him up like they used to do with the double knockout, when one guy would fall in the mat and one guy would fall in the ropes and fall over the top of him. He just rolls him up backwards, and basically Darby pins himself. But Cody, after taking the full force of not only Darby's knees and his back from him trying to give the finish, but then Darby giving him his finish unobstructed, and Cody's got enough wherewithal to hook anything to make it look like he's holding the guy down? I didn't get it. Either Darby pinned himself by accident was the thought, or somehow Cody hits it but uses Darby's momentum to roll him over and gets the pin. It didn't materialize visually like I'm sure that they thought it would. It didn't make sense. It didn't look right. And I'm like you, I think Darby should have fucking won. But he could have won by some kind of either a fluke or a disputed thing, or you could have used Brandy in some way to cause Cody to lose. But right now, Darby had just looked like a plate full of piss at the end of that thing. Great match, elevated him, and then he foiled a guy trying to use his finish, then used his finish and got beat instantly.
Like I said, I'm sure that Darby's going to beat Cody sometime over the next few months, but it's been clear they've been building towards Cody and Lance Archer from the moment we found out Lance Archer was going to be there.
Well, and that would be fine. It would have been fine if Cody to beat Darby Allin with another fucking finish. I just didn't get this. I hated not to like, because the rest of it was mostly so good that I hated not to like the finish, but I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. It didn't look right. Anyway, Scorpio Sky package. This was not as good as last week. Last week, I thought he was human. He told about his back injury. He talked about himself. The first half of this package, he didn't feel like he fit in with the veterans in SCU, Daniels and Kazarian, until he discovered his catchphrase. Like that was somehow important. Can you imagine a guy in a UFC? Boy, when Dana White first signed me, I didn't know whether this was going to work out for me or not. But that time I did that interview and the people popped when I said that thing. That's when I knew I was perfect for the UFC. And then, some stuff on his match with Jericho, and he wants to be the best and etc. But it wasn't as inspirational as last week. However, what was better than last week was the check-in from Max's Rats Estate in Cape Cod.
Massapequa.
Wherever the
last
fuck
week
it was.
Cape Cod.
Last week it was Cape Cod.
The only reason I know this is because I used to have a girl in Massapequa, so that's how it stuck out to me.
Wait a minute, you were fucking MJF's rat?
No. Major age difference between me and Max.
Okay.
And by the way, for the record, I think she may have lived in Massapequa Park, now that I think about it. I met her at Tower Records, for the record.
But Massapequa Park, those people are unsavory and surly, and they live on the wrong side of the tracks from Massapequa proper.
Well, you never know, Massapequa. There's some dangerous people over by the water there, I'll tell you.
But anyway, this guy did 2 or 3 minutes on an incredible promo about a hangnail and a neck nick. And what a weasel. He's a weasel, but he's not a weasel acting like a weasel. He is a weasel that is a true weasel. He is fabulous to behold. He is MJF, and I bow to his verbal greatness. So that even if he's got to, that's what they should have been doing all along. Even if he has to be on Skype for 3 minutes, get MJF in his fucking program. If you have national television and MJF can speak or be seen on it in any way, do that. Do more of that. What'd you think about old MJF's neck nick?
I thought it was all right. I mean, he's a great promo. I mean, there's only so much we could say about how good he is. He needs a haircut, but don't we all?
Don't we all? Boy, I'm telling you what, I'm getting miserable. And then that was followed up by, it made sense, Wardlow, his enforcer / muscle, against Musa. I've not seen Musa before. I have a feeling QT Marshall probably had a hand in training Musa. It was a squash match, and there was nothing the matter with it. Wardlow's green. He needs timing. He wanders around looking away from his opponent a lot. But he's explosive and has potential. But I just say, a guy gives a big move, boom, and plants a guy and stands up and walks across the ring, not looking at the guy and looking out at people that aren't there and getting seen by the camera and et cetera. And even when he was pulling the guy to his feet, he wasn't looking at his opponent. And Lance Archer, pay attention. I'm going to be talking about you shortly. But it's just, They do a lot of WWE style walking around and looking out at the crowd, even if there's not a crowd. And everybody needs to get more aggressive body language, and it just needs to project more instead of wandering. But Wardlow, he's got a lot of potential. He's a good athlete.
Was this the match? Was Muta the guy who just all of a sudden started running to the ropes?
Well, yeah, and he did. This another thing. He did that head palm thing, and they're doing this thing now where they either just cup the back of the guy's head and just push, and automatically he goes to the ropes, or sometimes they just take off and do it on their own. I don't know. It's if I only had time. But anyway, the bubbly bunch. What the fuck was that with the bubbly bunch?
Now, you haven't watched their little segments the last 3 weeks. I guess it's the third installment of the bubbly bunch. You haven't seen any of these.
Yeah. It's the same thing. I start out watching it, and it becomes obvious that they are talking to each other on their phones, but at the same time, there is video of them being shot from some other source.
Precisely.
So the whole thing doesn't make any sense, and I don't care about them talking to each other on their phones. But then they actually got into a fucking fight by punching the phone screens, and the fucking person on the other end of the phone would sell the blow. And so I just started fast forwarding until I got away from all of that. Did I see Virgil?
Yeah, you saw Virgil.
What was he doing in there?
The same thing everyone else was doing, putzing off. This is what I talk about when I say wrestlers should... Problem is, one of these guys, and I think I know exactly who, had an idea and thought, oh, it would be funny if we did this on TV. And they did it. And a lot of their fans will think it's funny. It's counterproductive. It's stupid. And when it comes to actual comedy, it's not very funny. But wrestling comedy and actual comedy... So
they lose out on every fucking standpoint. It's not funny. It's counterproductive. It's
just stupid.
It's just stupid.
Sport-based wrestling.
Yeah.
Then what is this? And like you said, even before the whole, you can punch the phone and all of a sudden, Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses gets hit. And then this idiot gets hit. And then we're in Virgil's living room.
Was that, because I didn't know who any of those people were. I fast forward, I saw Virgil, I backed up, and I saw a series of people that I did not recognize.
It was everyone Chris Jericho could get on the phone before he was about to film this stupid thing. And that's why you need somebody that owns the company or is the designated booker in charge of the company to put his foot down even with the main event talent and save them from themselves in some cases. But the problem is if there's someone who runs the company and they find this just as entertaining as the goofballs filming it.
As a bunch of other fucking dweebs that don't get laid. Hey, well, I guess that dweeb probably gets laid a lot. He has $1 billion, but...
Well, no, his dad has $1 billion.
Well, if your dad had $1 billion, you'd get laid a lot, too.
I'd probably get a job. But listen, I think... but, like you, beyond the silliness and the bad comedy, it drives me crazy. It's one thing if you film this silly segment with the five guys from the point of view of seeing them on their phone, but to have them talking into the phone and then as a separate person... filming them it's just so stupid. It's counterproductive. And again, you can have an idea that makes you laugh and share it with your friends. You don't have to say, hey, let's put this on national TV. Because sometimes it just may not be good enough.
Well, it's interesting you say that because this next idea they had was not good enough for national TV at all. Somebody had the idea that Kip Sabian and Jimmy Havoc should wrestle the best friends. In I don't even know what they called it. It's a no rules match, street fight, whatever the fuck they called it. It was bad outlaw wrestling with chairs done by people who have watched too much bad outlaw wrestling. And Trent. It's like those commercials for Liberty Mutual. Here's the Limu Emu and Doug. This was a bunch of bad outlaw wrestlers that have watched too much bad outlaw wrestling, and Trent.
I have defended Kip and Penelope several times in recent weeks on the show. There's no defending this match at all.
Well, I don't even know what Penelope did, because I'll tell you what happened. They've started rattling chairs around and fighting outside and doing all the same indie shit that people who grew up as fans of ECW and potentially fucking go to Juggalo shit. That's all they fucking do. And then they brought a ladder out. And then Jericho called this. They brought a ladder out. They've got chairs and garbage in the ring. It's a no rules match with chairs and garbage. And then the heels tagged each other. And which shows just how preposterous it is once you start doing this shit. But this was just horrible. Trent was the only person involved in this whole thing that had any business being on national television. I guess Penelope Ford, if she just stands there, because she's, Sable-ish in my opinion.
No,
she looks good standing there.
That's not fair.
But then here was the turning point in the match, is why I don't know a lot of what happened. Because they did a spot where Trent was down in the middle of the ring, sitting on his ass where he'd taken a bump, and Jimmy Havoc bent over in front of him with his AIDS-riddled physique and his scarred up fucking visage, and held his two fingers in front of Trent's face. And then as a tag team move, Kip, the incredible Kip, the 12-year-old child from England, it looks like he weighs 140 pounds, kicked Trent in the back, causing Trent to eye poke his own self on Jimmy Havoc's fingers. At that point, I hit fast forward, and this horse shit went another 10 fucking minutes. I don't know what they did. Pockets was involved. I don't know what they did. I don't care what they did. I don't care who won. This is an example, if you needed one, of why I would never lower myself to appear on AEW television. Once again, there's fucking professional wrestlers out there appearing on beIN Sports, local broadcast stations around America, and local cable access, and these fucking clowns are on national television.
Sport-based wrestling.
Sport-based double team eye pokes. So anyway, but then they did a video with Britt Baker in her office, and I fucking loved it. Because it was funny and entertaining, and still made her out to be a fucking just shrewish bitch. And she wasn't laughing at anybody when she was doing it. She brought it off well, where she called, and that was Rebel, the girl from TNA who was doing the makeup.
Reba,
where she called her back in the office, and you can still hear it was like on Bar Rescue. They still had the live mics on. He said, look, you need to do this like I told you to do it. I love that shit. It was funny. It was good material. It got Britt Baker over. And nobody was winking at how fake wrestling was, or that she was only playing a part. And there was no stupid comedy, physicality, fucking bullshit that couldn't actually fucking happen. It didn't seem to be that hard for them to do that. Why can't they do it all the time?
I thought it was great. They played it the right way for it to work. I think Britt Baker has just emerged as one of the best heels in the business. I enjoy watching her so much, whether she's at ringside talking shit into the camera or hitting someone with a shoe. And then this was just fantastic. Britt Baker's killing it right now.
And all the pictures of her on her office wall. See, that's the kind of thing. And that's another thing, like Shitstain used to try to do shit like that in TNA, but he couldn't figure out how. Shitstain had TNA spend $20,000 or whatever to build a fucking fish bowl for Shark Boy to live in. And AEW just goes with a camera and a few, I'm sure, pictures that probably didn't stay up in her office 24 hours a day to a dentist's office and shoots something great and gets the fucking talent over. That was fine. But then did you notice they came out of the Britt Baker package and the ring announcer was saying, and his opponent? We never heard the introduction of Baron Black. I think that was his name, against Shawn Spears. And I was running late. And sort of like everybody else in the world, I skipped this because they wanted us to they wanted us to think Shawn Spears was a top guy. And in the last fucking 2 months, they basically had him in the crowd fucking betting on shit and working with a job guy. So I skipped it.
Yeah, I don't need to see any more Shawn Spears either.
Okay, well, that'll be a short YouTube clip. On to the next thing. They did a package. I'm giving you another place. They did a package. He starts, cleanliness is next to godliness. They did a package on Marco Stunt. He sounds like he's 12 years old to go along with him looking like he's 12 years old. And they did a package of him being thrown around by Lance Archer. And yes, it looks impressive for the big wrestler to throw the little child, 10 feet to a bunch of people on the floor. But they ignore the fact they actually booked a match between them. If he'd have just done that, if the big, mean heel wrestler had just grabbed a little guy and flung him like that, that would have got the big guy some heat. But because they actually sanctioned a match between these two and put it in the ring like the people were supposed to act like it was fucking legitimate, and then they did all that stuff, it didn't make any fucking sense. And I wrote usually everything I write whenever he appears on the screen, Marco Stunt. Why? What the fuck? And then Marco Stunt versus Brody Lee. I am now going to take you, ladies and gentlemen, to what I know, because I have worked with and known for a long time personally the personalities involved. What would have happened if there had been smartphones in 1998? I would have seen this happen, but I guarantee you this is going to happen. Brody Lee left the WWE under somewhat acrimonious circumstances, right? He wasn't happy with the way he was used. He wasn't happy with his creative. They tried to sign him, but he turned them down. He was going to leave. Have I pretty much got that?
That's pretty much it. Then he signed with AEW, and then he appeared on Chris Jericho's podcast. That's the way it went.
Well, I guarantee you that Bruce Pritchard, now that there's such a thing, because you couldn't get Vince McMahon to watch tapes in those days because I know it's hard to believe, but all of the writing of the television product, all of the creative team business was done in Vince's dining room, at his dining room table, right off the kitchen in his beautiful mansion in Greenwich, every Wednesday from 9 a.m. to sometimes 8 or 9 p.m. Whether it was me and Bruce with Vince, or me and Shitstain with Vince, or Bruce and Pat with Vince, or Shitstain and Ferrara, Dreadlock Ferrara with Vince later. During that period, the late 90s, you went to Vince's house and you had a meeting with him, and then whoever was on the creative team went about their merry way and wrote up stuff based on what Vince had agreed on. You couldn't get him to watch video because he would have had to got up from the dining room table, walked through this big room that, I don't know, nobody ever actually sat in it. It's just a huge room with expensive furniture. And to the other side of that room was Vince's private office that he would go in, where he had a TV and a VCR, and that's where he'd go in when he had to talk to Sean on the phone privately or whatever. And the only way you could get him to watch something was if you got him to go in there and you put the VHS tape in and blah, blah, blah. That's why he didn't see a lot. But now that everybody's got a fucking screen on their fucking phone and in their hand, I guarantee you, I'm going to take you now, knowing the personalities involved. Bruce Pritchard is sitting in a room with Vince McMahon. And Bruce Pritchard says, "Hey, Vince, you remember Brody Lee, whatever his name was, Harper? How we tried to sign him. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to stay. He wanted to go elsewhere. Wasn't happy with his creative. Yeah, pal, he signed with the AEW, didn't he? Yep. You want to see him now? No, Bruce, don't have time. Don't want to. No, come on, Vince. You got to watch this. I don't want to see it, Bruce. Not interested. Got to work. No, Bruce, or Vince, you got to see this." And Bruce would hold Vince down practically, and Bruce would stick that phone in front of Vince's face, and he would show Brody Lee on this television program in this empty building, which Vince would hate. And he'll say it's low production value and low class and wrestling, working with Marco Stunt, and Vince will start laughing. And he will start horse laughing. And he won't be able to get that fucking horse laugh, and it will continue, and you will hear it from Stamford, Connecticut. The idea that this fucking guy that turned down their fucking offers, that didn't like their creative, that wasn't happy in the WWE, whether he was right or wrong, has now been put in a position where on national television he was having a match, one-sided or not, in an empty building with a 12-year-old child. This, if Bruce does succeed in putting that in front of Vince and making him watch that, it will ruin everybody's negotiating leverage from now on, because Vince McMahon's reaction after seeing that would be, fuck it, let them all go. Anybody that wants out, let them out now. Don't offer them anything. Don't raise the fucking money offer. Let them go. They'll end up like that. They have given Vince McMahon and anybody who wants to suck up to Vince McMahon footage to laugh over and fucking convince themselves that they were right all along over, and that basically they don't even need to try to keep anybody from going to All Elite Wrestling just with that one fucking piece of business right here. And yes, Marco Stunt sold and sold for a couple minutes, and then seconds after taking a big fucking move, he was up on the top and hopping and ducking, and then got planted and then picked up. He planted him with a fucking spinning sidewalk slam. It should have paralyzed him. And then Brody Lee picks him up so he can powerbomb him, because that's his finish. 1, 2, 3. And they just killed anybody's chances of getting of using AEW for leverage against the WWE or vice versa, because Vince, if he ever sees that, will not try to stop anybody ever again from going to work for this company. There we go.
Stop ripping these. People want them.
So then we got one more match. And boy, howdy, once again, I wanted to like this, and I liked most of it, but just Lance Archer against Dustin Rhodes with Brandy, who has changed clothes. She was run into at full speed by Darby Allin and bashed into a fucking security railing. She weighs 130 pounds soaking wet. She came back out selling in the end of the match to bring Dustin water because, of course, you know, even though she had internal injuries, he was thirsty. But now she's not only recovered enough an hour and a half later, not even an hour and a half, an hour later, that she can come out smiling, but she's changed clothes. She got that quick examination from the emergency physician from the medical facility, and then changed clothes instead of putting ice on the wounds.
Well, for the record, I believe they probably filmed these segments on different days, which is why
it doesn't matter.
I'm not disagreeing with you, although she did look much better in this outfit. Looked very good at ringside here. But I think that's why she wasn't selling it. There's no continuity. This is wrestling in 2020.
They put it together that way. Anyway, I like Lance Archer as a person. I worked with him in TNA. Lance Hoyt, by the way. Everybody changes their name so much. But Lance Archer needs to loosen up. I don't mean stiff work. Loosen his body up and his body language. He is very methodical. He's plodding around. He's stalking around in a methodical fashion. He needs to loosen up his head, his neck, and his body language. He needs to be less methodical and more explosive in certain situations. That's my free advice to Lance, because I like the guy and he works hard. Of course, Dustin, to me, is the star of this company. Every time you see him, he's over 50 years old. He's in the best shape I've ever seen him in. His work is always so smooth. So I'm always interested in whatever he's doing. And, you know, he knew what needed to kick this up a notch. Lance Archer kicks the fucking chair into his face and he gets some color. I wish he hadn't had the red makeup on, because the blood would have looked more impressive without the red makeup. But if you go back and watch this match, what I'm talking about with Lance Archer, and this is stuff that's correctable and easily fixed, and he can kick it in if he feels more comfortable and he gets it from down inside of him. But when he kicked the chair into Dustin's face and Dustin goes down to get the fucking juice, Lance goes up and mugs for the camera. Okay, well, that's giving him a shot so they don't have to take the guy getting color. But after the next 5 seconds, he was just wandering around the ring. He should have been right on Dustin and fucking ripping at his face to go to the break. Put the baby face in jeopardy. As it was, He's walking around hot dogging, and Dustin's laying there, and he's bleeding, but, boom. When they came back from the break, there's where Lance had Dustin down and was ripping his face in the ring, and he's ripping his bloody face, and, that's a great shot. And he gets some heat on Dustin, and they're doing some great shit. As I said, Lance needs more body language emotion. I don't know how to explain this better. When I used to have guys where we'd be watching tape and I would point at something and then I would actually physically do something, the same thing that they had done, but with more oomph to it, as if you're in that situation. I know they're going long, and I'm not saying they have to be Gene Kiniski pace going 100 miles an hour for 30 fucking minutes, but you need to know when to rest and take your breath and when to kick in certain points. At one point, Lance had Dustin selling and turned his back on him to fucking mug for the camera of the blood that was on his hands. And Dustin looked up and saw his back completely turned to Dustin. And Dustin slapped him on the back and scared the shit out of Lance. Did you see that?
I did see that, yes.
And because he had turned his back on the fucking opponents. Dustin slapped him flat back with both hands. Oh, shit. He has to be more predatory. He has to stay on a wounded opponent and be more confining to the guy's space and threaten him more, impose his will. Anyway, Dustin sold his ass off. He did everything right. Finally, he didn't make a comeback, but he got the ball kick in, but Lance Archer stopped him again. And it's like he's putting him over as indestructible. That's where Jericho said Archer standing around like he's doing dishes. That was kind of a little ribbon on the square comment, I assume, from Jericho, seeing the same thing that I was seeing. He needs to menace Dustin more. He's standing around like he's doing the dishes. We go to break again. We come back, still heat on Dustin. And at this point, just Dustin's cardio, and just that he's been able to carry this thing and lead it and doing this. And now Dustin's firing back, makes his comeback. I wrote he's amazing at his age. Archer hits the big choke slam when he catches him off the top rope. Dustin coming off the top. 1, 2. Then they put the rope walk in with Archer and the moonsault. I don't know if I'd have gone quite as long with the walk, but the moonsault was awesome. They did some more stuff. And then right as I'm seeing, well, it's going to be time to go or they're going to go off the air, right? So I know the finish is coming. But then this is the one thing that I thought could have been so easily, this loophole should have been closed up, could have been rectified easily. Why did Lance Archer walk over and take the turnbuckle pad off right in front of Ref Aubrey and run Dustin into that unprotected iron steel buckle 3 times? He's already bleeding. He's already been hit with several big moves. It buried the referee that he was able to do this, and she not only didn't do anything about it, but then left the pad off at the whole 9 yards.
Why wasn't it a DQ?
Why wasn't it a disqualification? Cody comes out. Key2 comes out. Key2 Marshall. QT Marshall comes out. Then Cody, they tease throwing the towel, but Lance Archer pulls Dustin back in. Boom, boom, roughs him up and bashes the back of his head into the mat, and then pins him with an iron claw that he has not yet established as a finish for him, really. Instead of all that awkwardness, what about boom, boom, boom? Dustin comes off the top rope, but Lance catches him in that big choke slam. 1, 2. That doesn't work. So he does the rope walk and the moonsault. 1, 2. They do what they were doing where Lance is really kicking some ass. And then instead of taking the turnbuckle pad off, what about if suddenly fucking Dustin had started firing up and backed Lance up and shot him off to the fucking buckle? But goddamn, at the last second, there's a reversal and Dustin goes to the buckle. But Dustin goes up and over as Archer charges. So Dustin ends up behind fucking Lance Archer. Dustin goes for the O'Connor roll-up. He pushes Archer into the buckles face first, and he pulls him out and rolls him up. But as he pulls him out of the corner, Archer, trying to hold on, grabs the goddamn fucking turnbuckle pad and pulls it off. So now Dustin has rolled goddamn Archer up with the fucking turnbuckle, but the turnbuckle pad's been pulled off, right? 1, 2, Archer kicks off, Dustin flies face forward, and fucking at one time with his already busted, gashed open head and all the punishment he's taken, hits the unprotected exposed metal buckle head first, falls back into the ring knocked out, and Archer hits his goddamn big move 1, 2, 3. Everything makes sense. The referee didn't even see the fucking buckle exposed until it was too late. You didn't see where that was coming. It's not just an attempted murder in front of a cop. It doesn't take 3 times head first into that goddamn buckle. Same fucking result. And it's a fluke. And Dustin's got an out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, they've been building up Cody versus Lance Archer. So in a lot of ways, the tournament was predictable. You kind of thought maybe they
But I mean that I don't mean the finish per se, who won and who lost. I mean that specific finish instead of the one that was done. It's still.
I didn't like the claw hold. It didn't make any sense.
It didn't make any sense. Why claw a guy that's fucking unconscious?
The one thing I will give a positive here, and by and large, I enjoyed the match. I think Dustin Rhodes is just fantastic at this point in his career. I hope he wrestles for a lot longer. I hope he's capable of that physically. But I thought Shivani and Jericho did a really good job of establishing what the other outcomes could be. It could be Dustin versus Cody in the main event. It could be Lance Archer versus Cody. What's Brandy going to do if Dustin wins? Whose corner will she be in? Beyond the hijinks.
I guarantee you she's going to figure out a way to be in both of them.
Was she going to clone herself? Clone Brandy's in each corner?
No, she will spend most of the, every 2 minutes, she'll switch corners. Okay, and then the announcers will talk about, okay, well now Cody gets Brandy for the next 2 minutes, so he's going to have the advantage because he'll have her in his corner. And then 2 minutes later, wait a minute, now she's in Dustin's corner. Dustin could win this whole thing.
Just do like rotations around the ring.
Yeah, just walk around the ring.
Well, listen, whatever we want to say about Brandy, let's look on the bright side. At least she's not doing that Nightmare Collective crap anymore.
Well, that's true. But anyway, back to this fucking thing. I'm just, once again, it's even with where they're going with Archer versus Cody, they still would have accomplished that. Cody didn't throw the towel in. He just teased it. And there could have still been a spot where Cody came out and tried to fire his brother up, or even where Cody came out and complained if Dustin had been kicked into the fucking exposed buckle, boom, and knocked him goofy. Cody comes out complaining to the referee. The referee sees the exposed buckle. But goddamn, it wasn't done on purpose. It was an accident. And boom, 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 the match is still going on and fucking Archer wins. That to me was not the way to go about that particular thing. By burying the referee and just make it kind of flat at the end. It could have been more oomph after they worked that hard. They went that long. Dustin was incredible. You know, Archer has a lot of potential. They haven't buried him completely yet with a lot of these underneath fucks. But
the turnbuckle thing just killed me because, again, on commentary, they're making a big deal. Like, he ripped it right off. Yeah, he did it right in front of the referee.
Yeah.
Right? It's one thing in not being there and it not being a DQ because the referee didn't see what happened. He clearly, in front of the referee, ripped it off and then rammed Dustin into it. Automatic DQ. I'm sorry.
Well, there you go. So that was the program. You know, I mean, and I can take the little tweaks and finishes and things like that. It's not a big deal. This was a good program. If you hadn't had the Outlaw Street Fight Tag Team match and, you know, the little fucking goof on the program, it wasn't that distasteful. And the stupid stuff with the Bubbly Bunch. A lot of this shit was good, and they worked hard and over and above what you would expect from an empty building, and you were right, they did do all that stuff in one taping marathon, so everybody was probably tired, so they should be applauded for doing good work, except the shit they put on there that they didn't have to. As we said last week, if they weren't in the position where they'd been talked into hiring guys that are just so outlaw and just can't handle themselves and aren't good enough or are embarrassing visually or just whatever, they wouldn't have to be pressing these guys into service now. They would have an entire roster of quality talent that they could be pressing into service, pandemic or no.
Hey, what do you think about the idea they announced some matches for next week's show, and it's clear that they're bringing in guys again from the Northeast. They're bringing in guys again from California. I'm not sure where they're taping it. I'm going to guess maybe it is still in Georgia, considering Georgia's restrictions have been, I don't even know if there are restrictions anymore in Georgia.
Yeah.
But what do you think about the fact that they are now going to have wrestlers coming in from all over the country for their tapings again?
Well, but we don't know how they're getting there. I mean, I live in Kentucky. I used to go make shows in New York all the time. Never saw a fucking plane. So the guy's a billionaire. You can get people to travel. You can either get planes for them. They don't have to go commercial. Or you can say, hey, I've signed a contract and I'm paying you $500,000 a year and we're not doing anything. So drive to fucking Florida from New York. That wouldn't be out of the way. Or Georgia from wherever the fuck. If they're having guys from New York and California just willy-nilly bopping through major metropolitan airports, that's, not something I would do, but I don't go through airports anyway.
Right, because next week they announced Kazarian, they announced MJF, so they're bringing guys back.
As I say, have they finally figured out, okay, we got to have different guys. We can fly them in a corporate plane, or we can get them to drive, and they're going to stay there, and they're going to tape X amount of stuff. I don't know. So I can't blister them for that, but I can sure say, nobody ought to be flying through airports these days yet. So we'll see what happens. And especially besides that, MJF has just recovered from that incredible hangnail injury. Even though now his nail is stronger than any nail ever, I worry about his neck. And I don't think he should rush that.
Well, fortunately, he has Wardlow there to back him up and make sure that he's okay and watch his back.
Well, you need somebody in these trying times to watch your back and your neck. Your neck. And your squat. Actually, catchers don't squat. Catchers don't squat, they crouch, right?
Well, it's a mix
is
of
it a
two.
catcher's squat or a catcher's crouch? Or are they squatting while they're crouching or crouching while they're squatting?
Hey, you never know. There's Benito Santiago. He did his own thing altogether.
I don't know squat about crouching. That's what it is. Anyway, all right. That's probably a sign we've gone on long enough. Can I leave now? Will you please let me go?
You are free to go.
All right. And folks, you guys are free to go. I will not see you on the website because you cannot order anything until May 14th. But I will.
Let me just add something real quick. On this past week's drive-thru, we did a watch-along of the first ever 6-star match. And on Patreon right now, patreon.com/Cornette, we have the audio and the video synced up so you can watch this classic match and classic brawl in Louisville, Kentucky, and hear Jim Cornette do commentary. The video quality is much better than the version on YouTube of that match. So check it out today, patreon.com/Cornette. That and, of course,
yes,
archived episodes.
Because, by the way, somebody said on Twitter, you mean you're going to watch Okada and Olivier again with fresh eyes? The first 6-star? No, silly boys. First 6-star match was in 1981.
Fresh eyes.
We have it on Patreon.
That's right.
And YouTube. Watch us on YouTube. Listen to us on YouTube. Just mainline us on YouTube. Act like we're Bleach and just ingest us on all the various platforms.
Squat on us on YouTube.
Squat on us, you squatters. Hey, I want squatters' rights. All right, we're going to have more squat puns next week on the program. And until then, we're going to get the fuck out of here while the getting's good. Thank you, fuck you, and bye-bye, everybody.